Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto hates his mother Artemis. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. A figure stood on top a rooftop looking at the village of her late lover. It has been 8 years since she left this place, 8 years since she left her child, her son. Now she had the time to make a quick visit and learn how her son has been living. She left him with the people she trusted. She is a goddess, but not the goddesses of this realm. No, she came from the Olympian realm. This is Artemis, goddess of the hunt, childbirth, moon and chastity, one of the Olympian gods. She had a very stressful day when she had finished hunting with her hunters, and with the constant bickering of her twin Apollo, god of the sun, and her annoying rival, Aphrodite, goddess of love, insisting that she has to find someone. She got mad, and let's just say that they'd never pressure Artemis again. So she decided to take a vacation at the elemental nations where she met her lover. It was an unusual meeting. She was wandering around the forest since the elemental nations felt much more clean in her realm. She encountered a group of bandits thinking that she was common civilian. She was about to reach for her bow when there were multiple flashes of yellow and all the ground dropped dead or unconscious while a man stood in between her and the group. He wore a blue long-sleeve shirt, over it was a green flag jacket. For the bottom was a dark blue pants taped at the end with a holster tied on his right thigh and a pouch on the back of his hip. Last was a white coat that reached half of his shin and with red flames licking at the bottom. His most distinctive feature was spiky blonde hair with 2 bangs framing his face and light blue eyes. This was Minato Namikaze, the Leaf's 4th Hokage and the Yellow Flash. At first she was surprised by his appearance but quickly turned into anger. She attacked him while he dodged and kept on saying that he didn't mean harm. He thought that she needed help, but from what he's been through he praised her that she had such abilities. He also took her back to his village so she wouldn't get ambushed again. She protested at first but then relented and thanked him, albeit reluctantly since she had deep hatred for males. She found out he was the leader of his village and quickly assumed that he would brag about his achievement, and was surprised that he sheepishly admitted that he only became the Hokage when he stopped the Third Shinobi War. Minato had given her a house where she can live if she wanted to stay, and stay she did. When walking around the village, she was immediately leered at by men while the women seethed in jealous about her looks. She had nearly killed a man when Minato arrived, stating that she was under his protection and no one will approach her if they valued their lives. Of course she had been shocked and touched about. Shocked that he would do it, even it could cause his position as Hokage change. Touched, because this was the first time a man had stood up for her, not counting Apollo or any of her family, since he did on his own will. After a few months they got to know each better. At first she didn't talk to him much. Just being silent and only answered like how an Aburame would with just a few words. Later she opened up and noticed that she smiled and laughed whenever she was with him. She was very confused about it and talked to Minato where he asked her out on a date. She blushed so hard when she had been asked, so she could only stutter out a yes, like a certain Hyuga would. They went out, had a simple dinner at the top of the Hokage mountain, and she loved every second of it. Soon she fell in love with Minato. She also learned that he was a demigod and was shocked to hear that she was not the only one who would have a child. She also told him who she really was, afraid that he would betray her trust, but was glad that he didn't treat her like the others did. Though he would sometimes joke about it, calling her Lady Artemis or Milady. She stayed for a year meeting Minato's predecessor, the 3rd Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. His last and only student, Kakashi Hatake. His previous girlfriend, Kushina Uzumaki. When she learned that Kushina was his previous girlfriend, she immediately asked what did he do and threatened to cut off what made him a man. Luckily, Kushina explained that had been going out in 2 years before and things didn't work out with them, so they decided to break up but still remained as friends, and both women considered each other as sisters and both got along. It always scares Minato that both would smile that scary sweet smile. Then a month came, she learned she was pregnant. She was first confused at how to approach this situation, but when she saw her child at the monitor screen, she decided that she would love her child unconditionally, even if her child would be a boy. She also would do it the old-fashioned way, like mortals would do. Then the day came her child would be brought to her world, which, unfortunately, has to be done in excruciating long labor. That prompted her to shout at her lover, "When I get my hands on you, I'll make sure that I'll turn you into a girl, you bastard." She gave birth to a boy. Her son had blonde hair like Minato and blue eyes, but in those eyes had a twinkle of silver like hers. Just looking at him made an unmovable place in her heart. The happiness was all for naught. Because that day also was a dark day when a tailed beast, the nine-tailed fox, attacked the village, and it happened. Her lover sacrificed himself to save the village, and the only way to do that was to seal it. And the best sacrifice was her son. She was weak and stuck to her bed from giving birth. In that night, she silently cried as she held her son, Naruto, close to her as tears fell. Minato's spirit would not be able to go to her world afterlife, as this world is different. Those who were born in the elemental nations would go to the Shinigami, said world's death god. Add the fact that her son is now that the Jinchuriki of a great beast that rivals, or greater than Typhoon, the bane of Olympians. It had been 8 years that night, and 8 years the last time she was in the elemental nations. 8 years that her lover died, and 8 years she had made heartbreaking decision. The day she left her precious son. She was an Olympian, and all demigods must be left with their mortal parents. Her lover and friend Kushina had died, so her son wouldn't have a parent to look up to. She wanted to take him, but her father, Zeus the king of Olympians, the only other one knew of her son, forced her to return to their world. Before she left, Zeus gave her an hour to say goodbye as an act of kindness, something she was grateful for. She spent the hour with her son and hugged him tightly to her chest as she rocked him to sleep. Once it was time, she gave her son to the people she felt she could trust: Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage; Kakashi Hatake, her late lover's student; Jiraiya the Toad Sage, her lover's mentor. They promised that he would be safe and looked after. After kissing her son and muttering a goodbye, she handed him over and vanished. Not to be seen again in the elemental nations. But now she came back just to see her son has been, hoping that he turned out to be like his father and would be one of the male or only male she would care about. She was interrupted when a mob ran down a corner chasing something. Getting a bit curious and a sense of dread bubbled in her stomach, she followed the mob. She landed at a roof and found them by an alley throwing things from broken bottles to kunais. She followed the trajectory of where the objects were aimed, and the sight made her eyes widen in horror and her blood run cold. The mob were beating up a child who looked no older than 8. The child had blonde hair, blue eyes with a twinkle of silver in them, and 6 birthmarks, whisker-like, 3 on each cheek. She knew the child from the first time she saw him. They were beating up her Naruto. Her son. She clenched her fist in anger. Her body shook in motherly rage as wisps of silver began sparking around her body. While that was happening, she unknowingly affected the moon. The silver-gray moon bled red as wind picked up and turned into a strong breeze. The mob noticed this and whispered among themselves. "What's happening to the moon? What's going on? The Kyuubi. It must be doing it." One exclaimed. "So that's why they think that my baby is the Kyuubi," she thought. Then she saw one of the ninja in the mob, a Chunin, took out a kunai and rushed towards her son, intending to kill him. Her instincts as a mother kicked in and jumped in between, catching the Chunin by the throat and threw him back at the crowd. The mob cried in rage, telling who she is and is she a demon lover. In a hushed voice that commanded power and filled with rage she spoke. "Get away from my son." Then all hell broke loose. Earlier with Naruto. Naruto had finished eating his dinner at the ramen stand and thought about the pranks he did today. He pranked the stores who threw him out of the shops. He put paint bombs in them via seals, and by the time everyone found the bomb, it exploded, covering everything in neon or dark colors. He also stole a few scrolls and a few kunai or shuriken from shinobis that passed by him, and lastly he had painted the Hokage monument on broad daylight with an orange kill me jumpsuit. It was a shame really. Shinobi's things were stolen by a mere academy student. The Hokage would have a hard time either in being proud at his surrogate grandson or be ashamed at how lenient his shinobi had gotten. Now, he's walking to his apartment. Okay, you might be wondering why that a kid like him would be living on his own. Well, to put it simply is that the orphanage kicked him out when he was at the age of 4 and lived in the streets for 6 months before the Hokage found him. The Hokage then gave him an apartment at the red light district so he wouldn't be beaten by the villagers. The people in the red light district didn't do anything to him and vice versa. They actually tried to help from time to time when he needed food or clothes. He also has this feeling that someone was watching from afar. At first he thought someone was stalking him or spying on him, but the feeling was more of a content feeling. It was like how his guards watch him, but this was more filled with emotion, caring and loving. It was the same thing when he would watch the night sky. He can feel someone up in the sky would smile down at him, and it made him feel warm in the inside. Back to Naruto, he turned around a corner and met a fist to the face. He stumbled back holding his nose. Looking up, he saw a mob carrying broken bottles, kunais, clubs, in their hands ready to beat him up. He mentally cursed that he forgot about the villagers. During his birthday the village would throw a festival to celebrate the defeat of the Kyuubi, and they would secretly form a mob, as they call it, fox hunting, and try to beat him up or unintentionally kill him. Not that they would mind it, since they'd be glad if he did die. After that, they would leave him bleeding to death before the Anbu that guards him would bring him to the hospital. He really wished that his surrogate siblings would be able to help him, but the council knew that his guards didn't see him as the demon, whatever that means. So they would try to send them to long-term missions whenever the chance they have would appear. Now he ran like hell around the village, trying to avoid and lose mob as they throw things at him. His clothes were now in tatters and he was slightly bleeding from the cuts he gained from the things that were thrown. He ducked under a bunch of crates and turned left and met a dead end. He turned around to escape but stopped as the mob came into view. A ninja and probably Chunin, addressed to them, "Come on people, let's finish what the fourth started." He got a roar in approval as they started to beat the life out of Naruto. Said child just stayed still, not even shedding a tear as he took it. He got punched, kicked, stabbed, burned and electrocuted by fire and lightning jutsus. He just winced or grunted the entire time, since he learned that whenever he begged to stop, they just beat him up more than normal, so he just took it. After an hour of beating, he sat there in his own pool of blood, with cuts, burn and dirt. His clothes were just rags by now. The mob admired their work and noticed the moon was blood red and the wind around them started to pick up. They murmured among themselves. "What's happening to the moon? What's going on? It must be the Kyuubi doing it." "Kyuubi? What are they talking about?" the boy thought as he slowly felt asleepy. He then heard crash and a thud. He then heard a voice. A voice he longed to hear. "Get away from my son." Before he blacked out. Mindscape. Drip. He heard a sound. Drip. Like a drop of water? Drip. He felt his body touching water, but he was not even wet. Azure eyes snapped open as he sat up and hastily, looking around. He saw that he was in some kind of sewer. Great, they first beat me up for no apparent reason, then they threw me into a sewer. What's next? A biju going to eat me? He asks himself. You would probably taste good for me, kid. I might even consider you my appetizer. A deep chilling voice sounded behind him. The blonde jolted upon hearing the voice. He spun around before he froze in disbelief and fear. There was a cage, a giant cage, with a paper in the center with the kanji of seal on it. Behind the cage were amused blood-red eyes with slits for pupils staring down at him. He stepped back and the darkness in the cage dimmed and revealed a giant fox with 9 tails swinging behind him in a bored manner. Kyuubi, the child breathed out. In response, the Kyuubi just gave a vulpine grin, showing his sharp canines, so my container knows who I am. At least you're not dumb like those villagers, it said. The boys breathed hitched in fright. Why did it say he was his container? Then it hit him like a pile of bricks. He remembered the words they said to him. They called him a demon, a monster. The sealing tag and why the Kyuubi called him his container. He learned in class that in some villages had a biju they controlled to use. However, it was said that the biju is sealed into a person to use its tenant's powers. He was a Jinchuriki, so you connected the dots. Yes, you are a Jinchuriki, but the difference is that you are you and I am only sealed inside you. Honestly? I expected you to throw a tantrum like the kid you are, it mused. Naruto had a tick mark on his head. Yeah, well, it would have happened had I not been forced to grow up at a faster rate than normal kids, he retorted. The fox nodded his head, but the boy it saw it was nodding sadly, yes. Kids your age should have not been forced to the life you are now. You were not treated the same way as my previous containers were. This caught Naruto's attention. The container tilted his head confused like a dog would do. Am I your second container then? The biju shook his head. No, you're my third container, kid. Who's the second then? I only know the first, Mito Uzumaki, the first Hokage's wife, and I think a member of the Uzumaki clan who were known for their amazing kenjutsu skills and the best in the art of fuinjutsu, he said. The fox just laid there listening and he had to admit, He's impressed at the blonde's knowledge of the Forgotten Clan. The idiots in the village are more idiots than I thought. The kid knows his history, it's really a shame those fools lost a great treasure. Well, like the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure, or is it Fox now? Meh, the fox thought with a smirk. Anyway, my previous containers was Kashina Uzumaki, she died when I was extracted from her by a man in a spiral mask. I don't remember much, all I know when I got free I saw a red eye, then everything else was blurry. Then I find out that I was sealed in by the fourth. And before you ask, no, she's not your mother. She's was your godmother, the Biju said as he lowered his head so he can watch Naruto intently. Said boy was thinking why the fourth chose him. From the books he read about the fourth, yes, Naruto actually reads. He finds it a hobby and he is also curious just about everything. He knew the man was a noble man and the pictures he saw, he noticed that he looked a lot like him. Just take away the whisker marks and add bangs and you have a chibi Yondaime. Then his eyes widened in shock, his father was the Yondaime, his idol, the one who sealed the Kyuubi in him. So you now know who your father is? It sounded more like statement but he got a nod still. Your father was an honorable man. He could not ask for anyone's else child to bear the burden of being a Jinchuriki, and even as a father, he was still Hokage, so he only had one choice and that was to seal it inside you. He chose you because he believes in you. The Kyuubi explained, he let the information sink in for a while. The fox can see the understanding in the boy's eyes before his features softened, and for what it's worth Kit, for enduring such great pain I'm sorry. Naruto looked up in surprised. He was not expecting that the great Kyuubi no Kitsune would apologize to him. He gazed at the eyes of the Biju and can see only the truth, sadness and pity. Perhaps everything about the Biju about being a mindless creature was wrong. They were simply misunderstood as we never tried to befriend one before, the blonde boy thought. He walks up to the fox going through the cage and stopped. The Kyuubi seeing Naruto walk up to him closed his eyes. However, his eyes snapped open when he felt a hand on his snout. Looking down, he could see the azure-eyed boy had a smile on his face. Not the mask that he would put up in a happy-go-lucky facade. No, it was a genuine smile. I forgive you, Kyuubi. This had the Biju's mouth open in disbelief. He forgave him when he was the reason why he was beaten on daily basis in his village. Kids at my age would probably run in fear from you, but I do not. I do not see the mindless beast as others say. I only see a misunderstood creature, who wants to be accepted, and I accept you. You are no longer the Kyuubi no Kitsune. You are my companion, my conscience and my friend, Naruto said with a smile. The Kyuubi was shocked. The boy accepted him and his respect for the boy had gone up. The boy didn't insult him the first time he saw him, only curious, and the boy acknowledges him as an equal, a friend. Then he saw something he thought he would never see again, his creator or his father, but merely a spectral figure of him. The sage of the six paths, Hagoromo Otsutsuki, standing behind the boy with small smile on his face with a hand on the boy's shoulder. The Kyuubi's eyes widened slightly before letting a smile grace his vulpine face. Old man sage. I think I found the partner you have said to me before. I will let not you down. Both you and the kid, the fox thought. It was then both felt Naruto beginning to wake up. You're about to wake up, kid. The blonde nodded as his feet started to fade. Yeah. Guess I'll talk to you soon. He paused. But do you have a name that I can call you? I don't want to call you Kyuubi forever. He asked. Again the fox was surprised, but smiled nonetheless. It's Kurama, the now dubbed Kurama said with a smile. Naruto smiled as well. He gave a salute before fading completely, leaving a grateful and content Kyuubi. Present time and outside the Mindscape. Hearing the words that came out of her mouth, the mob started to shout curses at the woman in front of them. The chunin she threw at another, got up and started to take out their kunais. You won't get the drop on us again, lady. Now why don't you just give yourself up to us? We promise we'll be gentle, the chunin said. She just scowled at them before her bow is in her hand, and as quick as lightning fired 2 arrows. It hit dead on, right between the eyes. They hit the ground dead. The civilians were shocked, stood frozen as they felt the anger and killing intent radiating off the woman. They can see their death flash before their eyes and a few of them nearly pissed their pants. Artemis then gazed at the rest with her icy, cold silver eyes. Get lost. Her tone was the same as ice that could freeze an object. They didn't need to be told twice and scrambled back in fear. not wanting to feel the wrath of a goddess, not that they needed to know that, but it would be good measure. When they finally left, she put her bow back as she went towards her son and kneeled down, taking his head in her lap. She could see numerous wounds on his body, and her body trembled again in rage and tears flowed down her cheeks. "My baby boy, I'm so sorry that I left you here alone. I should have taken you with me like I wanted. Damn those ancient rules," she swore. She pulled out a pouch that carried pieces of ambrosia. She then cut them into small pieces and put them in Naruto's mouth, helping him swallow. She then pulled out a small vial of nectar and allowed a few drops into her son's mouth. Once she felt like he's had enough, she put them away. She gazed over his body and can see that it was already mending the injuries. However, she noticed a faint red glow on wounds that were fatal and could hear the sizzling as well steam come out it. "I see you are watching out for him as well," she muttered. As she watched Naruto's body heal, she can sense 4 people coming to her direction. After a minute, the Hokage and 3 Anbu landed behind her. Hiruzen surveyed the surroundings and can see a woman with his surrogate grandson on his lap, but could see there was blood stained on the boy's clothes. Then 2 dead Chunins. Then both Hiruzen and the dog-masked Anbu saw who the woman is. They gasped as Artemis looked at them, more specifically at the Hokage. "Hiruzen, care to explain why my son is beaten on his birthday?" The other 2 Anbu, cat and snake, widened their eyes behind their masks when they heard that. They were also surprised when their teammate and Hokage bowed to the woman. "Artemis P, please let us explain. I have been trying to help young Naruto as much as I could, but when Minato died, the council took most of my power. I could only do so much as my age is already catching up to me," the old Hokage said. The dog-masked Anbu nodded as well. "Yes, Lady Artemis, I also have been helping Naruto along with my teammates who don't see him as the fox. We guard him in the shadows, but the council has been trying to send us to take longer missions, so we cannot help him at times like this." Artemis looked into their eyes and could see they were being honest, and they made good points as well. She could not fault them at all, but she was mad. Not at them, but mostly the civilian council and the elders. "It is all right. I can see that you are trying your best to help my son, and for that I am grateful. Thank you for listening to us, Artemis, but maybe we should take this to the tower so we can let young Naruto rest and I can explain to you what has happened," the monkey summoner suggested. Artemis agreed as she caressed her son's cheek, getting a small growl from his throat that sounded like a purr. They chuckled or giggled at this. Hiruzen then placed a hand on the goddess' shoulder as Artemis held onto Naruto. The old Kage gestured for the Anbu to follow as he used the body flicker technique, and they disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Hokage Tower. When they arrived, Artemis quickly set Naruto on a couch that was at the corner of the room. Hiruzen then gestured the Anbu to remove their mask, and they did so as Artemis studied them. The one who wore the cat mask is a girl who has purple hair that went down to her mid-back and had onyx eyes with supple lips. This was Yugo Uzuki. The second wore the snake mask. She had black hair that was tied that had a fan shape and same onyx eyes. This was Anko Mitarashi. The last one was male, though she didn't hate him for the fact he protected Naruto from the day he was born. He had silver hair that stood up and had his left eye closed with a scar going down it. What made him special was he wore a face mask covering his nose down as he simply eye-smiled. This was Kakashi Hitaki, the last student of her late lover. Anko and Yugo face-faulted while Artemis growled in annoyance. Back then Artemis had tried to get rid of the stupid mask off only to fail, comically, before she gave up when she was pregnant with Naruto. The 2 Anbu, however, also tried but could never get it off. Their plan would always backfire when they thought they had removed his mask. "Hello, Lady Artemis," Kakashi greeted. Even if he was wearing a mask, you could see a hidden smile behind it. Said Goddess sighed, "And I thought you'd remove your mask when you already have one." She smiled softly at the one-eyed shinobi. "Thank you for protecting Naruto, Kakashi." The young teen simply chuckled. "It was no trouble at all, my lady. I've had a fun time watching him play pranks around the village. It makes things livelier and helps keeps 3 of us in shape. His stealth is simply amazing, already at Anbu level. Just before this he went on a pranking spree, setting up paint bombs inside shops, stole some jutsu scrolls from other shinobis, dyed the Hyuga clan's clothes in pink and drew on their faces while they were asleep yesterday, and he's just an academy student." Kakashi listed off, while the Hokage and both Kunoichi either chuckled or giggled. The goddess beamed in pride at what her son did. Hiruzen coughed, trying to keep his laughter in control. Yes. I gave the boy permission to do it and said to think of it as stealth training. I might even go far and say he's a prodigy waiting to have the right teacher to teach him, the old man said. This time Artemis smiled widened. For her son to be complimented by a Hokage who was proclaimed to be the professor and the god of shinobi was an achievement. Hiruzen stood up from his chair and walked up to a wall with pictures of the Hokages. He walked over to his painting and bit his thumb, swiping his blood on it. It vanished and is replaced of two scrolls. Both were medium-sized but had different features. One had a gold ribbon with the insignia of a whirlpool and cloud of lightning, while the other had a red ribbon with the symbol of the leaf. The three gathered shinobi gasped while Artemis looked confused. The monkey summoner handed the scrolls to the mother while she looked at both scrolls, still confused. Hiruzen, what's the other scroll, since I know the other one came from both Minato and Kushina, but what is it? She asked. The third Hokage sighed. This is a copy of the Forbidden Scroll, where forbidden techniques are listed because they can kill the person who performs or needs too much chakra to do, he explained. Artemis' eyes widened before narrowing. I handpicked the jutsus that can be beneficial to Naruto and think of this as my gift for enduring the burden of a Jinchuriki for so long. The goddess smiled at him in appreciation before accepting. It's best that we go now. Zeus would notice me for being gone in the Olympian for too long, she said as she got ready to teleport both her and Naruto. Wait, Yugo suddenly spoke. The others were surprised at her. Yes? The purple-haired girl pursed her lips before looking at the blonde boy with a soft smile. She then looked into the goddess' eyes. I wish to go with you and be with Naruto. The others' eyes widened, bar Artemis when she saw the girl look at her son with a smile. I consider him as my little brother. When I first met him I saw him as a troublemaker, wanting to gain attention, but as I continued to watch him, I saw that thirst to get acknowledged by someone. I talked to him, and that time was when I saw who he really is, a boy who was lonely and had no one. From that day I would always try to cheer him up and play with him when we were alone. The girl smiled softly at the sleeping blonde. Anko suddenly stood up. I'll go as well. I have been treated the same as him but never got beaten on daily basis. She scowled before continuing. I also see him as a brother and I instantly felt a connection when I protected him. I know that he deserves a better life, so if it means leaving this place then he'll have my help. Besides, he also promised remove to this curse mark on me when he was strong enough. She finished with a grin. Artemis faintly smiled. I will accept this if you accept my condition. The girls nodded, both determined to stay with their favorite brother in all but blood. Join my hunt when Naruto is old enough to go to camp. The hunt is consisted of girls that have a bad past with men. I'm sure you both have some situations about them at times. Both nodded sadly at this. Well, grab onto my arm and we shall take our leave. The girls did as they were told as she held Naruto close and looked at the Hokage and her late lover's student. Farewell Hiruzen, Kakashi. I wish you luck. A light enveloped as both covered their eyes before they disappeared, leaving the Hokage and Kakashi alone. With Naruto. Naruto's eyes fluttered open before a groan escaped his lips. He silently yawned as he sat up, looking around before he noticed that he was not in a hospital room nor his apartment. It was nice room, a couple of drawers and a desk that sat against a wall made of oak. There was a TV on a nightstand and there was balcony showing the night sky. He heard the door open and tensed, getting ready to defend himself. Though he was confused when a girl with purple hair wearing Anbu uniform, he blinked owlishly before he saw the cat mask on her side, then relaxed with a smile. Your cat? Yugo smiled. Yes, Naruto. It's nice to meet you in person finally, and my name is Yugo Uzuki. Nice to meet you too, big sis. The boy suddenly remembered the words of the stranger who came, Mom. He panicked and pleading look at Yugo, asking if she saw his mom. The purple-haired girl expected this as she sadly shook her head, no. The blonde slumped depressed, his happiness leaving him. Yugo only giggled before she pulled out a folded paper and gave it to Naruto. Said boy tilted his head and looked curious at the letter handed to him. Thinking nothing of it, he opened and read it. Dear Naruto, I know this must be quite a shock to you, but allow me to tell you that I am your mother. I'm sorry that I couldn't be with you when you grew up, but our family has certain rules that forbids us from raising our children. You will understand it soon. If you or may not know this, let me tell you. Your father was Minato Namikaze. the fourth Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village and the one who stole my heart. He loved you with all his heart despite only holding you at one time. When he died, it broke my heart, but leaving you was the greatest mistake I made. I left you to 2 out of 3 people who I trusted, and they did well in protecting and raising you. After finding out that your life was like I took you to my world. It may be difficult to adjust, but you have Yugo with you and you will come to love your new home, and I know you will make many friends here. I enrolled you in a school called at Yanxi Academy so you could interact with people your age and is required to go to school in this world. In the drawers are the world currency, some books about the history of this world and a map of the city you're in. If you also did or did not know, then you are the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The villagers were blind to see you for the fox. Naruto heard a snort inside his head before quieting. Anko or snake. Like Yugo and Anbu who watched over you is here with me, but you'll see here soon. I have already told Yugo this, so she will guide you and help you. My son, I know that you have questions, but I ask you to be patient and all will be revealed in time. I love you with all my heart, my little maelstrom, and I am always watching over you. Love, your mother. P.S. Read up on Greek mythology, it will come in handy in the near future. Naruto slowly put down the letter as he silently sobbed in tears. He was happy that his mother didn't happen and learned that she is still alive and also love him. He felt a pair of arms wrapped around as he leaned on to his big sister in all but blood. Yugo only soothed the blonde boy with calming words as Naruto tried to control his sobs. Kurama also did the same in his mind. He would have done the same thing if he was in Naruto's place if he found that he has a mother was alive and loves him. When the sobs died down into sniffles, Yugo looked down and was met with puffy red eyes but held a glint of joy in it. Her young charge stood up and walked towards the balcony. Taking a deep breath, he smiled as the moonlight shined at him. Naruto felt warm bathing under the moon's light and could feel his mother's arms around him as if she was hugging next to him. Said boy just looked up to the sky, arms spread apart before shouting, "Look out world, because Naruto Namikaze is going to take the world in a storm." Yugo giggled and shook her head, amused at her surrogate brother's antics before joining him in the balcony. 6 years later, Naruto sat in a school bus by the window watching things move. Had been 6 years when both Naruto and Yugo arrived at a new world. During that time they had been learning about their new home. They were amazed just about everything. The technology was more advanced than theirs, giant buildings made up of glass, and the cars, which Naruto called magical wagon, the first time he saw it. Of course this made Yugo laugh at the embarrassed boy. She had always teased him whenever she can. Of course he entered at the school his mom had enrolled for him called Yanxi Academy and started at 1st grade. At first he had a hard time struggling since they learned he had dyslexia, meaning the words would jumble around that he would read it all over again, and ADHD, basically he couldn't still. But that didn't stop the blonde from trying, so imagine Yugo's surprise and Naruto's joy when he got the highest grade the first time. Yugo was skeptical about Naruto's grade, but after the 2nd and 3rd year, she believes that Naruto was smart or just loves to study. When asked about it, the boy said it was a bit of both, and Yugo just shook her, either amused or how right the blonde was. His surrogate sister has been training him the first 4 years in taijutsu, genjutsu, ninjutsu, but self-studied in fuinjutsu. She was amazed at how fast Kurama's Jinchuriki could keep up with all the theories and history about jutsus. The 3rd Hokage was right, Naruto is truly a prodigy. What even amazed her was how quick Naruto learned in fuinjutsu. She had studied fuinjutsu before and all she knew was the theories to it. She couldn't even make a simple explosive tags. Genjutsu, they had thought he couldn't do a genjutsu because of his massive reserves, but when he casted the technique demonic illusion, Treebind death technique, he had done it successfully. This confused both of them, even Kurama, who was trying to find out the reason why his container was able to do genjutsu so well. Ninjutsu? Well, let's just say Naruto had a smile that lit up like Christmas lights for 2 days. Flashback. The two were standing in clearing that serves as their training ground and is located at the back of their house. The former Anbu thought it was time that Naruto learned about his affinity so she could quickly train him and spar with him, only helping him in physical activities. Naruto stood in front of his sister in all but blood with a small smile on his face. "So big sis, what are we going to do today?" he asked. She offered her own smile before answering, Well Naruto-kun, I think it's time to find out what is your affinity since we'll be starting your ninjutsu training tomorrow. The blonde's smile widened when he learned he'll learn ninjutsu tomorrow. Yugo pulled out a blank piece of paper and handed it to the blonde who had a confused expression. That Naruto-kun is chakra paper made up of special trees that reacts to chakra. I had packed a few papers for this moment. Channeled chakra into the paper, and if it rips you have wind, if it wrinkles means lightning, burns means fire, it turns soggy means water, and if it crumbles it means earth. Go ahead. Said boy nodded and did as he was told. Instantly, the paper split into 4 pieces. The furthest left wrinkled with lightning sparking every now and then, next turned soggy with drops of water falling, the other crumbled that it turned to dust, and the last burned to ashes. Both blinked at that. Yugo shook her head thinking it was some kind of mistake while Naruto was not sure. So Yugo handed the boy another and let him try again. The results were the same. Yugo's eyes were wide as saucers and her mouth agape. I impossible. No one can have that many affinities. Let alone all basic elements, and all of them are strong. She exclaimed. Naruto's smile was almost similar to Guy's smile. He then thought if it had anything to do with Kurama, and speaking of the fox. No kid, I have nothing to do with your affinities. All of it are natural, so meaning it's only you, but with me inside of you it must have strength in it. Also I think you could make sub-elements with how your affinities are so strong. The Biju explained. The boy nodded and saw that Yugo was about to ask. Yugo, Kurama says it hasn't anything to do with him. It's all me, but with Kurama inside of me I think I have strong affinities for all elements and possibly sub-elements, the blonde Jinchuriki said. Yugo sighed before nodding and instructing him to make clones for training. End flashback. Learning that he had all elements as affinities, he made 100s clones for each element to train with. So far he had finished wind, fire, and water while he struggled with lightning and earth manipulation. Unfortunately he didn't get the chance to train sub-elements yet. While doing that, he made another batch of clones for Fuinjutsu and he was at level 3 now, almost 4. As his clones did their task, the original didn't slack, so he sparred with Yugo at least once a week and do his usual training routine, which consisted of 50 push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups and 20 minutes jog around the house. He would increase the exercises 25 each and add 5 minutes to jogging. Training his shinobi skills were alright, but he also kept up with his studies in school as well, and he always got the highest grade. This made him happy, and Yugo would reward him a 1 jutsu for each element if he did. He didn't, at least, as it made him more determined since he loves learning new jutsus. Now he was currently in a field trip. Sitting by his side was a black-haired boy with sea-green eyes. This is Percy Jackson. He was shorter than most of them, but then again Naruto had only started eating right when they arrived in their new world. The blonde stood respectively at 5'5". He was brought out of thoughts when Percy elbowed him. Keep staring and people might combust, he joked. In response, he smiled and said, we could only hope. He also found out that Percy too had dyslexia and ADHD. He admitted that it might be a coincidence they did have the same deficiency. Though the difference was that Percy had low grades, at least third to the last. Even if Naruto did help, he still didn't get high grades. Guys don't joke about things like that, another person spoke and seated beside Percy. From that friendship came with another, Grover Underwood, a Caucasian skin color, short curly brown hair and brown eyes. The most notable thing about Grover is that he uses crutches because he had injured his legs when little, thus crippling him. Though it couldn't be true since it never stopped the crippled boy to run on Enchilada Day, it baffled everyone on how he does that. However, the blonde's heightened senses picked up their scents and wondered why Grover's smelled like a goat while Percy's scent smelled like the ocean. He shrugged it off thinking it was some kind of cologne. He shared a dorm with both of them and has been inseparable ever since then. Although when they learned that Naruto didn't have parents and only had Yugo as his guardian, they sympathized for him. So Percy decided to let his friend meet his mother one time on Christmas. Sally Jackson was honestly a kind woman from what Naruto has seen, and Yugo readily agreed with her little brother. Then Gabe Ugliano, Percy's stepfather, couldn't care less if Percy got a friend and rambled on how he would have to pay both of them, Naruto and Yugo, with his money. Yugo had to be restrained by Percy and Sally and learned that even though she was quite beautiful she had strength, that was for sure, and it was all thanks to being a kunoichi. Not that they knew that. When Percy asked Grover, he said that he had his own plans and would see them after break. They didn't hear from them until they came back at Yancey Academy. The blonde found it odd about his friend's strange behavior but shrugged it. All of them had secrets and he was one of them. They were in a field trip heading towards the Metropolitan Museum of Art that was led by Mr. Brunner. Mr. Brunner was their Latin teacher, who was a middle-aged man with a scraggy, thinning brown hair and beard and was seated to a wheelchair and always wore a tweed jacket. Despite his look, he was Percy's favorite teacher. He always tells interesting stories and would sometimes tell a joke to liven up the class. Some days Mr. Brunner would bring a set of Greek armor and weapons. Because of this, it's one of the classes that Percy doesn't sleep on. However, Naruto kept his guard up around the man. He just came in one day and took over and took an interest on both of them. At first it was only Percy, but after a few days he also took an interest in him, whether it was his high grades or the mysterious aura that Naruto had. On his side was Percy. He wore a simple light gray shirt with a dark blue jacket over it and dark blue jeans with brown Converse shoes. Grover wore light blue shirt and a red jacket over it, for the bottom baggy khaki pants with black boots. Naruto was the oddball of the trio. He wore a gray long sleeves shirt with a picture of a moon with a wolf howling. Underneath it had a motto that said, Alpha Wolf. For the bottom he wore a black fitting pants and light blue Nike shoes with tints of orange. What made him the oddball was the face mask. The face mask was like Kakashi's, but it was black instead of dark blue. Not only Naruto was well known in school of his grade but also because of his mysterious behavior. This got unwanted attention from what Yugo said is to be the bane of all kunoichis and shinobi's greatest fear. Fangirls. He had gotten fangirls in his first grade cause. When he was asked why he wore a face mask, he said he has scars he had gotten as a kid that he doesn't like to show that it'll cause problems. Technically he wasn't lying, since before he wore the mask other girls would try to fight over him, and it was all thanks to his whisker marks. That, and he wanted to honor his brother, Kakashi, since he learned that he was his father's last student and he always wore a mask like he does now. The blonde Namikaze heard a snicker and looked to his left and saw a red-haired girl throwing wads of peanut butter. Nancy Bobofit was a horrible example of a girl, or what Percy would call her, the class female dog. She was always nice whenever the teacher is looking at her, but the moment the teacher turned their back she quickly turned into a class bully, and would always target Grover when she gets the chance. Naruto wouldn't get targeted since they thought that Nancy, even though she can be bad, she's still a girl at heart, has a crush on their friend, and they would sometimes see her blush when Naruto turns his back on her. Percy also wouldn't get targeted because he'd fight back or the blonde would stop it, so that left Grover as Nancy's target. I'm gonna kill her, he heard Percy grumble. Naruto too wanted to stop the girl, but he would only use words since it always worked when he does it. The reason why is that the last time someone bullied Grover, they found themselves suspended by their underwear on the flagpole with the national anthem playing at the background. Percy and Grover knew that their blonde friend did it, but for the life of them they just couldn't prove it was him. Nancy continued to pelt peanut butter and bread at Grover before Percy started to stand up. That's it. Before he could though, he saw a gleam in Naruto's eyes. A gleam that promised humiliation and pain. He smirked before calming down. The girl was about to throw another one when a paper shuriken embedded at the side of her chair. Everyone also saw it and looked to where it came from, and it was from the blonde itself. Ms. Bobofit, I would like you to stop throwing food things at my friend or you'll end up getting pranked by someone. Instantly she behaved like a puppy dog, as did everyone around them bar Percy and Grover. All of them knew that it was Naruto who pranks someone if they did something to piss him off or mess with Grover or Percy. The bus entered the parking lot and the class began to file out. Naruto looked at the museum in amazement. Even after all this years of being in this new world, he still can't help but wonder what are the capabilities of technology. They walked in and saw many things pertaining about Greek mythology. He glanced to his side and saw Percy's mouth hanging open in awe, and both Grover and Mr. Brunner's face brightened when they entered. He wondered what got them so happy about Greek mythology, since he always reads about it. He decided not to think about it and get Percy out his state. If you don't close your mouth, a fly will go in it. Percy promptly shut his mouth while he glared at his snickering blonde friend. The three friends paid attention to what was said in the back of the group, listening of how Athena made a chariot and Poseidon made horses out of seafoam. Percy leaned to his friend and whispered, I bet it'd be cool to ride in one of those. Naruto agreed instantly with an eye smile, it's fun and dangerous. I like it. Grover, however, did not feel the same with his two questionable insane friends and groaned. I swear these two are gonna be the death of me. Then a teacher walked up to the two in question and reprimanded, "Keep up, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Namikaze. This is Mrs. Dodds, this is their teacher in math, and she always wore a leather jacket even though she was more or less between 50s and 60s years old. She had joined when their previous teacher mysteriously disappeared. For some apparent reason she held a strong dislike for Percy and would always call him out if he didn't know the answer to the question." They continued as Mr. Brunner led them in front of a statue of a girl called Steel. Percy, Grover, and Naruto listened intently, but Nancy and her friends snickered, making crude comments about the statue. They ignored them until Percy heard Nancy say the statue was naked and promptly shouted to shut up. This was heard by Mr. Brunner and asked, "Mr. Jackson, do you have anything to say?" "No sir," he replied. Nancy and her friends snickered, busted. She would have said more if Naruto didn't give them a glare. Percy looked at his friend grateful and looked back at Mr. Brunner and saw him pointing at another statue. Only this time, the statue was a man and held two kids in his hands and both hovered about his opened mouth. Percy recognized it instantly, that's Kronos eating his kids. Yesen? Naruto could tell their teacher was not satisfied with his friend's answer. And he could see that Percy seemed that he couldn't remember much, so he decided to take the attention off his friend. Kronos, the king of the Titans, ate his kids because a prophecy was foretold that his kids would someday take on his rule. He didn't like that, so he ate them while Mother Rhea, his wife, hid their last-born Zeus. When Zeus grew up, he tricked his father into barfing up his siblings. Ew! The girls complained as Naruto, Percy, Grover and Mr. Brunner rolled their eyes. The blonde continued, the war occurred between the gods and Titans. The gods won and peace settled with Kronos' 3 sons took control with Zeus the king of the gods and domain of the sky. Poseidon, the king of Atlantis and domain of the sea, and lastly Hades, king of the underworld. He finished, leaving Mr. Brunner and Grover impressed while the others looked on bored. That is correct, Mr. Namikaze. When the gods ruled they had children. Mr. Jackson, what is the term for these children called? Percy thought and recalled some lessons from the teacher. They were called demigods, right? Part god and part human? He said, unsure. Exactly, for years the god has been having affairs with mortals and some believe they still do. This got some of them murmuring among each other about being a cool demigod and the likes. However, Nancy thought otherwise, like we'll ever need this to apply for jobs. Why did Kronos eat his kids? Who are the Greek gods? She grumbled, but 3 people heard her. And why, Mr. Namikaze, Mr. Jackson? Mr. Brunner said, to paraphrase Ms. Bobofit's question, why do we need to know all this? Grover then leaned a bit next to said girl and muttered, busted. Shut up, she whispered harshly while Percy seemed to think about it before shrugging, I don't know sir. Naruto stayed quiet as he thought about it. It seemed that it had another meaning to it, but there were many possible answers to it. He looked up to meet the crippled teacher's eyes. There are many answers to that, but the one I have in mind sounds ridiculous and some might call me insane for it, but it could help us learn from the mistakes of the gods and for the future, he said. Mr. Brunner nodded, satisfied with the answer he gotten, while Grover looked at his friend in a new light. Excellent answer, Mr. Namikaze, full credit to you and half credit to you, Mr. Jackson. He clapped his hands, gathering their attention. Now Mrs. Dodds, I believe it's time for lunch. Said teacher nodded and beckoned everyone to follow her. The blonde Namikaze was about to follow but stopped when he saw an open door. Curiosity getting the better, he walked in and found a big room with a statue in the middle. He gazed at the statue, feeling a bit drawn to it. The statue was a woman who had long hair that reached down the middle of her upper back. She wore a dress that stopped above her knees and wore sandals. Over the dress was a green cloak with silver linings at the edges. She carried a bow on one hand and an arrow on the other. By her side stood a wolf, both looking dangerous and deadly but at the same time beautiful and graceful. He spotted a plaque in front of it. He tried to read it, but thankfully he didn't need to, since he saw a symbol of a moon and arrow with a crescent moon behind it. He knew the symbol already. It was the symbol of Artemis. A voice broke Naruto in his trance and looked behind him and saw Mr. Brunner wheeling towards him as he continued to speak, goddess of the hunt, moon, childbirth, wild animals and chastity. he finished as he gazed at the statue and sitting. Shrugs asterisk, next to the blonde. Sorry Mr. Brunner, I just saw it and couldn't help myself. I just feel like something is calling out to me, ya know? Also I always liked reading Greek mythology, he said sheepishly. Said teacher looked at the boy analytically before shaking his head with small smile. It's okay, it's good to see someone like you is interested in Greek mythology. Naruto nodded in agreement before looking at the statue again. I know she took an oath because of a guy named Orion, but what did he do to make her remain a virgin? Some say she mistook him for an animal when she was hunting. Others say she was tricked by her brother Apollo, or he greatly angered her and betrayed her trust. But only Artemis could answer it herself. Naruto was skeptical about the choices, but he had a feeling that it was mostly the latter, and whenever he had a feeling then he'd follow his guts, and his guts never let him down, not once. And the last part, Mr. Brunner said as if she was real, but it couldn't because gods weren't real. Snored asterisk. Gods aren't real? Really, Kit? You're from another dimension with ninjas doing the impossible and control the elements, and you're saying that gods aren't real? If there's one thing that all dimensions have in common is, the impossible is possible. Kurama spoke in Naruto's head. The blonde mentally shook his head. That is true, but I'll believe it when it's real, and I'd want ramen for a week if it was real. Deal. Deal. The Biju's evil snickers made the blonde uncomfortable, but nevertheless he wouldn't go back on his word. That's just how he is. He was gently shook by his teacher and led him outside. Come along now, wouldn't want the rest leave us when they finish, he said. During lunch, the group sat at the steps of the museum as they watched cars drive by and people walk or taking a break from work. The sky looked really bad, as a storm might be brewing tonight since dark clouds almost covered the city. Lately, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki noticed in TV news spoke about the world floods, hurricanes and big storms were forming, leaving the weather reporters confused at the strange weather patterns. Then there was a guy, a hobo from what Naruto can tell, holding up a sign saying, "It's the end of the world." The trio of friends sat down near a fountain as they ate their lunches and Naruto eating his ramen silently. Nobody could understand how Naruto could eat with his mask on and how he was able to keep his ramen warm. Said blonde just sighed in a bliss with a mischievous grin. Ah, the wonders of genjutsu and storage seals. Kurama found it amusing since his cantainer's personality irked people who knew him and had tried multiple times to get the damn mask off, and Naruto was sure he would sometimes found a figure of his old protector dog giving him a thumbs up with his Anbu mask off while eyes smiling at him. Grover turned to Percy and asked, "So you got detention?" "Nah," the brunette replied, "not from Mr. Brunner. I just wish he would cut me some slack. I mean, I'm not a genius like Naruto. Definitely not like me." Naruto chuckled when Percy lightly punched his shoulder. Grover shrugged. "Okay, could I have your apple?" This caused Naruto chuckle again as Percy gave the apple to his friend. Naruto turned to his right and saw some boys pelting pigeons with pieces of bread. "I swear boys are dumb," he muttered. He was about to eat again but realized what he said. Why did say that? The three friends continued to talk about the field trip when Nancy and her group walked towards and, accidentally, dropped her lunch on Grover. Oops, she grinning, and everyone could see bits of Cheetos between her teeth as the others laugh at Grover. Percy growled and tried to stand up but was pulled down by Naruto. "Don't. You'll only get yourself in trouble and make it worse. Don't worry, they'll get what's coming to them." He made his point when he glared at them and they all shivered, knowing they're in for it now. Percy seemed to calm down slightly but still could not help glare at Nancy as they helped Grover clean himself up. Then something unexpected happened. Nancy somehow got into the fountain with a loud splash, gaining people's attention around them as well, the teachers including Mrs. Dodds, with said teacher going over to pull the girl out. "Mrs. Dodds, Percy pushed me," Nancy cried out, but Percy and Naruto were not listening. Both were trying to comprehend what happened. Percy was trying to think of an excuse and why he always gets blamed, but the blonde Jinchuriki was trying to think of what happened. When he was about to turn away from Nancy, he caught sight of a tentacle made of water and pulled her in the fountain. Mrs. Dodds turned to Percy when she had fished Nancy out. "Mr. Jackson, come with me now," she said. Naruto broke of his thoughts and looked on at the scene. Again, unexpectedly something happened, and that was Grover standing up fidgety without his crutches. "No, wait. It was me, I pushed her." Percy was a little stunned that Grover would stand up for him while Naruto looked at his friend strangely. "He's hiding something. He keeps on fidgeting and is getting sweaty, and with my enhanced hearing I can hear his heart beating rapidly and his breathing is starting to quicken, the blonde thought. It seemed she didn't believe him. No. You. Stay. Here, she nearly snarled. No one noticed it except Naruto. And he caught distortions around the teacher and a scent hit his nose. It smelled something rotten and extremely awful that it made Kurama cover his nose since their senses was connected. Grover gulped and sit down as Percy looked up from his thoughts and saw Mrs. Dodds waiting by the entrance. She pointed inside and he followed her as Naruto narrowed his eyes at this. He turned to his friend and saw him whimpering, and that made him raise a brow at him. Haha, your friend is such a wimp kid. The fox snickered. The container merely rolled his eyes at his tenant and stood up. Hey Grover, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, so see ya. He made his way back to the museum as Grover nervously looked between Mr. Brunner and at the entrance. With Naruto. Naruto made his way around trying to find Percy went to, but he couldn't find his friend. Seriously, where the heck did Percy go? Then a thought entered his mind as he slapped his head in realization. Why didn't I think about finding him through scent? He sniffed around but heard a scream. Well, I think I know where he is now, he said to himself with a sweat drop. He went towards where it came from and turned into a corner before bumping into someone. Both fell down and looked at who they bumped into. Percy? Naruto. Come on, get up, she's coming. The brunette jumped to his feet and attempted to drag his friend, only for Naruto stuck to the ground with chakra and pulled Percy back. Who's coming? What the hell are yo? Where is it? A deep scratchy voice called. Both turned as a figure appeared above them. It had gray wrinkly body, its eyes were black as coal with sharp claws and leathery bat-like wings on its back. What the heck is that? Kurama, any ideas? Thought of a slightly panicked Naruto as he tensed his body to prepare for a fight. Said Biju sat up and looked through the blonde's eyes and knew it was time to be serious. No. I have never seen something like this before, but I think it belongs in this dimension. Naruto nodded at that and looked to see it about to take a swipe at them. Grabbing Percy, he pulled them down in time to dodge its attack. He ran towards it and jumped, sending a spinning kick to the head. It got knocked back and slammed into a wall hard. I won't be nice again, so tell me, where is the lightning bolt? The creature demanded. Naruto looked at his friend and gave him a look that said, what did you do now? Don't look at me. I don't know what she's talking about, and that thing is Mrs. Dodds. He exclaimed. Naruto looked at him in surprise. That thing is Mrs. Dodds? He didn't had time to answer because he was forced to backflip from swipe from her. He reached into his side before he forgot about his weapon pouch in the dorm. Damn it. Big sis was right. I should have sealed my pouch on my pants when I had the chance. Guess I'll have to resort to ninjutsu. If you do that, then you're going to answer some questions from your friend, Kurama added. At this Naruto sighed. I know that, you furball. Now shut up and let me concentrate before you get both of us killed. Kurama snorted and went silent. The blonde took this as an initiative as he turned to the brunette. Percy. What I'm about to do and you to see, you must not let anyone know this. Do I make myself clear? He said seriously. What? N Naruto, what AR? Do I make myself clear? This time he added a bit of killing intent, just to show how serious this is. Percy shivered when he felt the air get cold and just nodded. Naruto nodded and turned to Mrs. Dodds as he made hand seals. Try this. Wind style. Air bullets, he shouted. Blast of wind shot from his mouth and formed into bullets and hit the monster teacher directly. Not giving her a chance to recover, he held the tiger hand seal, fire style, fireball. This time he shot narrow flames out of his mouth before it grew into the size of a basketball and burned Mrs. Dodds slightly. She hissed in pain and anger as she glared at her new target. While this happened, Percy perfectly imitated a fish of what he saw. Mrs. Dodds stood up shakily, anger clearly seen on her ugly face. What the hell? She should have died when she received both attacks directly, Naruto thought, stunned. You'll pay for that. She bared her fangs and Naruto was nervous since his jutsus couldn't wound or kill her. Percy just looked on at the fight, his fear forgotten and overlapped by awe at what his friend did. They then heard the screeching of wheels, and when they looked over, they were surprised Mr. Brunner there slightly panting in his wheelchair. What ho boys, he shouted and threw something to both of them. They caught and looked at their hands to see a pen for Percy and a moon crescent keychain for Naruto. They looked at their items before deadpanning at the man on a wheelchair. What are we supposed to do with these? Percy fumbled with the pen and accidentally twisted the cap. He pulled his hand back as the pen morphed into a sword about the same length of his arm. Whoa, he said amazed. Naruto looked at the item in his hand and decided to squeeze it. Like Percy's it morphed, but instead of a sword it became 2 pairs of 3-pronged kunais. Naruto's signature weapon, only it was forest green in color and had silver wolf designs on it. Well, let's kick some monster butt, he exclaimed and rushed towards Mrs. Dodds with Percy behind, although he was still shaking in fear a bit. Die! She dived down with her claws ready to kill, but thanks to Naruto's reflexes and speed, he saw it a mile away and ducked under her and slashed both at her shoulders and gave a kick to the chest. She hissed in pain and collapsed on the tile floor immobile. The blonde saw this and used this as an advantage. Now Percy. Finish her. Percy ran towards her and swung the sword horizontally and cut her head off and exploded in golden dust. Percy looked at where Mrs. Dodd's last place was and didn't understand what had happened. Did they kill her or did she vanish? Naruto looked around and saw that Mr. Brunner was not with them. They looked at their hands and saw they only held a pen and a keychain respectively. They quickly left, not wanting to gain attention nor explain what had happened. They walked back outside heading towards Mr. Brunner but got intercepted by Nancy. Where the hell have you been? Mrs. Kerr just told us we're about to leave, she sneered at them. They blinked owlishly and asked, who? She just rolled her eyes and left. The boys then noticed that her clothes were now dry, like it was never wet to begin with. They asked Grover what she meant, but all they got was a stuttering answer from him. They knew he was lying, so went to where they could possibly get it. They walked up to Mr. Brunner, who sat in his wheelchair and had an umbrella attached to the back of his chair reading a book, like he never moved at all. He looked up and smiled. Ah, Mr. Jackson, you found my pen. Bring your own pen in the future for writing purposes. Mr. Namikaze, that would be my charm, so please hand it over. They did so and asked him if he knew about Mrs. Dodds. All they got was a blank face. Who? Naruto looked at Mr. Brunner's eyes and caught the sign of lying a moment before it quickly went away. Mr. Brunner had a frown on his face. Are you boys alright? There is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip. There is not even a Mrs. Dodds this school year, he said and leaned forward, concern lacing his voice. Percy stood gobsmacked. He knew what he saw wasn't his imagination because it had happened before, so he knew it was real but could not confirm it. Naruto meanwhile looked away in thought and his eyes narrowed. Kurama, you there, bud? He called in his mind. I'm here, Naruto. Everything is real, I can tell you that, but with how everyone but your friend Grover and that teacher Mr. Brunner do not know this monster known as Mrs. Dodds, then I guess someone must have erased their memories and replaced or used a genjutsu on them. And no one else except you. Yugo and that Anko person came from the elemental nations. He grunted since the fox didn't like things that didn't have answers to make them understand. I know that, but maybe someone from this dimension can. Yes, it's possible, but for now don't bother it and act like you don't know, or that Percy Brat might not trust you anymore. Now, we'll discuss this later. The blonde ninja looked at Mr. Brunner to see him talking with Grover and said listened as he discreetly glanced at them. He narrowed his eyes. They know something and I'm going to find out if it's the last thing I do. That was Blonde's last thought before he and Percy got on the bus to get back to school. Percy is really confused. He didn't know what to make up of his life because every time he's been to school something weird happens. And during the field trip just became the #1 weirdest things that has happened. Why is that? Well, his math teacher, Mrs. Dodds, was able to turn into something akin to a monster, or really is a monster. Then he discovers that Naruto can spit out wind and fire out from his mouth. Yep, life is good for him. Naruto couldn't say the same. He had to keep Percy quiet when both of them were alone, or someone passing by might hear them. When he was sure they were alone, he placed a silencing barrier on the wall and locked the door with a security seal. He then explained that he came from another dimension where ninjas live and control the elements and do the impossible. Percy demanded a demo and he did, by walking on the wall and sat on the ceiling. He also said that Yugo was also a ninja and his mother, who apparently was alive, brought him to this dimension. It took Percy a while to let the information sink in, but he admitted that it was cool to have some kind of super friend. Naruto just deadpanned at him. That's it? All you like about is me having powers? When Percy gave a hesitant nod, Naruto sat in a corner with a storm cloud above his head and comically crying tears, all the while drawing circles on the ground, and kept muttering about, I'm not worthy. All he wants a super friend. Percy's sweat dropped when he realized he made a mistake and promptly apologized, and was forgiven instantly with Happy Blonde Ninja. Percy also tried to figure out what happened to Mrs. Dodds by saying some phrases that was said by her or asked others if they knew her. All he got were stares from others and Nancy asking if he was an idiot. But when he asked Grover, he knew he was lying. The blonde Namikaze knew that as well but decided to take more of a stealthy approach. However, they had a problem, and that was a Latin exam. Currently they were inside their dorm reading. Naruto was at his bed reading with two clones at a study table, and Percy was sitting at the foot of his bed desperately trying to read but to no avail. After a few seconds the brunette gave a cry of frustration and threw the book across the room and mistaken hit a clone. Luckily Naruto was prepared and made another clone to replace. I can't tell the difference of this Chiron and Karen person. The blonde and his clones looked at each other and smirked silently. Well, for one, Chiron is the one with I. And is the trainer for heroes or demigod heroes, and Karen with the A. is the one who is a ferryman of the underworld and transports souls to said hell. The three Narutos finished each sentences with an eye smile. Percy let out a growl in irritation as his eye twitched. Easy for you to say. You're a guy who makes clones of himself and doesn't worry about dyslexia like I do. How come you can be relaxed when this is so hard? He shouted at him. Luckily Naruto made sure that the room had a silencing barrier and security seal keyed with his chakra. The blonde gave a shrug as his clones continued to read. Don't know, but Yugo says that I'm just smart and I like reading. You could say it's a habit, so I usually don't get easily frustrated. Percy sighed before picking the book he threw and asked to open the door since the ninja explained about the use of the security seals and only he had access to it. I'll just go ask Mr. Brunner for help. Maybe he won't mind. Naruto just nodded and glanced at the door out the corner of his eye. When the door closed he made a third clone and channeled chakra into his arm. A seal glowed before smoke appeared and held a mask in his hand. This mask was the same as Yugo's and other Anbu masks, but this mask was a wolf. Now you might ask why he got a wolf when he could have gotten a fox? Well, he had gotten something in the scroll his dad left him. Flashback. An 11-year-old Naruto panted as he lied in the ground staring at the sky with his eyes closed. His face mask was lowered. He wore a blue muscle shirt, black Anbu pants and black ninja sandals. He also wore blue fingerless gloves and had white bandages around his arms. In his hands held a wooden ninjutsu. He was covered in bruises and dirt after from a spar with Yugo. Said former Anbu stood above his frame and was breathing slightly. She too had bruises, but it was less than her charge, and she wore the standard Anbu attire bar the mask. She had a smile on her face as she looked at the panting Jinchuriki. Not bad, Naruto, but you still have a long way to defeat me. However, I can tell you're learning faster in Kenjutsu, Ninjutsu and Taijutsu. Even though you somehow have perfect chakra control, you still don't like Genjutsu. You have to use everything in your arsenal if you want to win, she lectured. Naruto just nodded. He was tired to argue at the moment, and he had scroll that his father left for him and he wanted to check what it was. He pushed himself to sit up with a groan. He channeled chakra into his right wrist and in a poof of smoke a large scroll appeared. Yugo looked at him curiously as he read the scroll. When he reached the last line his jaw dropped and his widened to the size of plates. This confused Yugo. What did he find out just to be shocked? She thought to herself. Walking behind him, she looked over his shoulder and read it. Like Naruto, when she read the last line she went into shock and disbelief. In Naruto's hands was a summoning contract, but not just any contract, it was an elemental wolf contract. Naruto broke out of his shock and had stars in his eyes, his pain long forgotten with the new impossible contract. He looked at Yugo with a pleading look. Big sis. How do you sign a contract? I want to sign this since dad left it for me, and maybe they could help me train in my affinities as well, please. He said as his eyes watered and his lips quiver. While Naruto may be 11, he still looked cute in his age because he still is short for someone his age, and add the whisker marks, then you have an adorable Naruto. Yugo, while still a kunoichi, she still is a girl in heart and mind, so she did the logical thing that even a goddess couldn't resist. She glomped the blonde in a hug and rubbed his cheeks, getting a purr from the boy as he tried to loosen her hold and get her to teach him summoning. After a few minutes, she pried away from him while he laid the scroll on the ground. He looked at her waiting. Okay Naruto, First you have write your name in blood in the column, then when you've finished I'll show you the hand signs, practice it for a while and when you memorize it, then build up chakra to summon, she explained. He did as he was told and practiced. For 5 minutes he practiced until he got it right. He looked at Yugo and she gave him a smile of encouragement and gave a nod in return. Biting his left thumb he swiped his blood on his right palm and went through hand signs, boar, dog, hare, monkey, ram, summoning jutsu. He yelled as he slammed his hand on the ground. Seal formulas appeared around his hand and a large smoke appeared. The reason for this is when he gathered his chakra he gathered about 3/4 of his reserves. Thus he unintentionally summoned the leader. When the smoke dissipated they looked up and what they saw made them gulp and take a step back. Standing in the once empty clearing was a wolf as tall as Kurama. It had gray silky fur, amber-orange eyes that glowed with slits for pupils. It had red cloth tied around its neck. Another noticeable thing is the silver arm guard on its forearms. Its teeth glinted in the sun showing its wolf-like smirk. "Who summons me?" it bellowed. Swallowing the lump of nervousness, the boy took a step forward and bowed. "It is I, Naruto Namikaze, my lord," he spoke in a respectful tone. Yugo had drilled manners in his head should he encounter someone rich or who has great authority, and he was thankful for this kind of occasion because he didn't want to get eaten too soon. The wolf looked down and closed his eyes and started to get smaller, surprising the two ninjas. Yugo had told Naruto the legendary Sannin's summoning and only Tsunade Senju's summoning. The slug contract and its holder Katsuyu could be in different sizes. The wolf shrunk into the same height of Naruto, which made said blonde pout. Why couldn't he just grow bigger already? He had been eating the right food and slept early, just why? Yugo silently giggled at his expression as the wolf sat down in front of the boy. "Naruto Namikaze? My name is Fenrir. Now what is the reason you summoned me here?" he asked. Getting up from his bow, he took a deep breath and looked at the wolf in a determined look. "I wish to prove myself to be your summoner, Lord Fenrir," he said. The wolf crouched a little so he was eye level with Naruto. "Then I shall judge you in learning your memories. If I deem you worthy then you'll be our summoner, however if you do not exceed my expectations then your name shall be removed from our contract and you can no longer summon someone from my clan," Fenrir explained. Naruto just nodded before pain kicked in. He wobbled a bit but he steadied himself. He could see memories about him, the glares, the harsh words and the beatings he got from the villagers. He would have cried but he didn't want to worry Yugo and look weak in front of Fenrir. Then his mouth slowly formed into a small smile. Another set of memories played but this time it was the good things he received from the people, the third Hokage, his surrogate siblings, the ramen stand family, Kurama and lastly his mom. He smiled at the thought of the people that was precious to him. He may have not met his mom but he couldn't care less. She had gone back for him when he needed and he was grateful for that. A growl broke him out of his thoughts and looked at the wolf summon in surprise. What did the wolf think about him now that he knew about his past? The wolf however sensed his nervousness and his eyes dilated. "Do not fear me, young pup. I know what you hold inside and I do not judge you for it. I only see a boy with great potential to do great things. However there is one more thing I wish to know," he said making Naruto sigh in relief. Fenrir looked at him directly in the eye. "If you were to have the elemental wolf's support and strength at your disposal, what would you do with it?" he asked. The blonde Jinchuriki looked down for a second before looking back at the boss summon with a determined look. "I'll protect my precious people that I have now and meet in the future. I will not abandon when they need me the most and I'll show them that my strength is theirs as well." Fenrir blinked in surprise before he grinned. He liked the boy. He was like Wolf when talking about the people he loves the most as he protects and works with his own pack. Then Naruto Namikaze, I Fenrir, leader of the elemental wolf clan. Accept you as our summoner, he boomed. He looked back at the smiling blonde and smiled himself. Now before I return to my home I shall tell you that your personal summon will be my son, Arashi. Also I shall give you wolf-like abilities. This means letting you control the elements easier, even combining to get sub-elements and have enhanced senses. While you already have enhanced senses thanks to your tenant, having our enhanced senses gives you sharper vision and your sense of smell is much more sensitive than any regular dog. Your sense of hearing can let you hear someone's heartbeat if you have enough focus. I bid you farewell young pup and I hope we have another meeting. I'd wish it in a battlefield. He muttered the last part but thanks to the enhanced hearing that Naruto now has, he heard. said Blonde silently chuckled to himself as the boss summon vanished in a cloud of smoke. At the sideline, Yugo, who watched the whole escapade, was slack-jawed. Her surrogate brother had 5 affinities of the basic elements, has almost perfect chakra control, massive chakra reserves with a cooperating Biju in his gut, and lastly, he has a summon that must be more awesome than the legendary Sanin. Elemental nations. Jiraiya, who was peeking behind the female hot spring, Tsunade, who was gambling in a bar, and Orochimaru, who was planning and experimenting with his curse mark, suddenly sneezed before their eyes narrowed in anger. Someone says that toads, slugs, snakes are not awesome. This was their respective thoughts. Back with Yugo and Naruto. Yugo felt a chill running across her spine but shook the feeling off. She shook her head with a smile. Only you can have a more cool summon than anyone. I don't whether I feel happy for you or envy you. But still it's cool nonetheless. He looked at her with a smile. I'm just plain awesome like that. He sent a thumbs up to her while she giggled at his response. Alright, let's get back to our spar now. Naruto saw a glint in her eyes when she said that and shivered. End flashback. Naruto weaved through hand seals and a poof of smoke. His hair turned black and was shoulder length. He pulled out a scroll from his bag and laid it on his bed, channeling chakra into it, a set of Anbu clothes. He put them on swiftly under 1 minute and went out of the room. He locked it and quickly made his way towards Mr. Brunner's room. He arrived in a few minutes and saw that Percy was there as well. He swiftly hid in the shadows to avoid detection. Percy reached for the doorknob but stopped when he heard a voice, worried about Percy and Naruto, sir. He froze before he leaned in to listen clearly. I mean a kindly one in school. Now for sure we know that they're. Patience, Grover, we'll only make it worse. We need Percy to mature more, but as for Naruto, he is a strange one. He seems different from the rest, bar his personality of course. He chuckled softly at the end. Naruto's sweat dropped from the shadows and had a small tick on behind his head. Inside his head Kurama was laughing hysterically and causing a headache to the blonde. But sir, they may not have much time left. The summer solstice will have to be resolved without them, Grover. Let them enjoy their ignorance for now and keep Naruto in dark with him. Sir, they saw her. Their imagination, Mr. Brunner insisted. The mist over the students and staff will be enough to convince them. Naruto narrowed his eyes behind his mask and thought, mist? Is it some kind of illusion technique that makes false surroundings? Or implant false memories to the subject? Sir, they've been asking questions and I don't think I can lie to them anymore. You have to, Grover. Yes, it's hard to that they've become your friends during your time here, but understand it is for them to be safe. It was silent for a few seconds before Percy heard Grover, sir. I can't fail my duties again. His voice choked on emotions. You know what it would mean. You haven't failed your duties, Grover. Mr. Brunner spoke kindly. I should have seen her for who she was. For now, let's worry about keeping Percy and Naruto alive until fall. Thud. The book Percy was holding dropped as said boy had his eyes wide. He snapped out of his thoughts when he heard footsteps behind the door. Picking his book up, he ran straight back to his dorm. As for Naruto, he only narrowed his eyes and had doubt trusting both Mr. Brunner and Grover now. What is Grover's duties? Who is really Mr. Brunner? He filed those questions later and held a half-ram sign and whispered, body flicker technique. And he was gone in a vortex of wind. With Percy. Percy ran to his dorm quickly but quietly so he wouldn't wake others. He rounded on a corner, only to stop in a complete halt. His jaw slacked while his eyes bulged out of his sockets. I think I figured out why Naruto places security seals now and changes the locks every day. The weird thing is I expected this to happen when I first heard he was the most popular guy in this school, but seeing her do this. Yeah, not gonna talk about this again so soon. He thought, well, that's because in front of him were 5 girls holding various materials. Yes, he saw all of them, but one particular girl stood amongst them and he knew her clearly. Nancy Bobofit was outside their dorm and was whispering among them. Did you bring everything? She asked while she continued to picking the lock. I've got the rope, the one on her right said. And I've got the drugs. All we do is let him drink this and it'll put him to sleep in 6 hours and we'll have Naruto to ourselves. Another spoke to the farthest left of them, but spoke creepily at the end. A sweat drop formed at the back of the black-haired boy's head as he inched away from the area. He spun on his heel and rounded on the corner to bump into Grover, Percy. What or why? Whatever Grover was about to say was cut off when Percy clamped his hand on his mouth and shushed him. Gesturing him to peek at the corner, Grover raised a brow but complied. Like Percy, the conditioned boy was gobsmacked at what he saw. Percy dragged him back to Mr. Brunner's office and knocked. They waited and heard a muffled, "Come in," and both walked in. Mr. Brunner turned and looked at them confused while he discreetly looked at Grover with sharp gaze that made him flinched. "Percy, Grover, what is that you need from at this time of night?" he asked. They looked at each other and they turned back to him with a sheepish look. "Well, you see, sir," Grover said, "he would get some things in his locker while I was coming here to ask for help, but I left my notes back at my dorm." The teacher nodded confused, "But when we got back at the same time, we saw why Naruto always changes our lock every night," he said. "And what would that be?" he asked curiously. He and the teachers have been wondering about that too a few months now. This time it was Grover who spoke up while he chuckled nervously. "Well, you see, sir, there were 5 girls. One of them was Nancy, picking the lock of our rooms, and we think they're planning to rape him." He said the last part with a sweat drop. Percy himself had a sweat drop as both pitied their blonde friend. The teacher in the wheelchair just looked at them blankly. "This is a joke, isn't it, Percy? Grover?" He found it hard to believe someone will try to rape someone, in a school of all places. With Artemis. Artemis looked up and narrowed her eyes. "Someone plans to rape my baby. I won't let a hair be harmed if I have anything to say about it," she thought as a dark aura surrounded her and the hunters inched away from the matriarch while Anko, who also had the same thought, sweat dropped. "Whoever plans to rape Naruto, then they just signed their death warrant," Anko thought. She shivered at the killing intent that radiated from the mother goddess as she put some distance between them. Back at room, they shook their heads. "No, it's not, sir. Just see it for yourself," Grover said. With a sigh he wheeled his way to the 2 boys' dorm. Like both friends said, there were girls there and still locking the pick of the door. Mr. Brunner's sweat dropped and cleared his throat. The girls turned around at the sound and found Percy, Grover and Mr. Brunner standing, sitting for the older man's case. "I do believe that breaking into a fellow student's dorm in the middle of the night is against the school rules," he stated. The girls flinched and knew that they were busted, so they hung their heads. Mr. Brunner shook his head in disappointment. "I never expected this to happen. It is disappointing to see you about to rape a fellow student." The girls ducked their heads in shame. He then continued, "Follow me to the principal's office and he'll have a stern lecture about this event." The girls trotted away, dragging their feet in sadness, and the teacher turned to the 2 boys. "Now why don't you head back in and sleep now?" "I'm sorry I couldn't help you in your studies, Percy," he directed the last part to said boy. The raven-haired boy nodded in understanding before he knocked to let their friend to let them in. The door opened and Percy silently sighed in relief when he saw only Naruto with a confused expression on his face. "Oh, Percy, Grover. I thought you might have slept outside since you haven't come back in a while." The other 2 deadpanned at each other. "He says that kind of thing and doesn't even know that he would have been nearly raped tonight," they thought as they changed. They got into bed and went into a blissful sleep. However, Naruto and Percy's last thought were, what are they hiding? Next morning, the 2 boys were leaving a 3-hour Latin exam. One mentally exhausted while the other is glad to have finished cause he didn't want to go through it again. Percy was worried that he had been found by Mr. Brunner listening in last night. But he sighed when he gave them both the results of their exams. As expected, Naruto's scores were high, nearly perfect, and as for Percy, well, it was not passable. "Percy," he called, "don't be discouraged about leaving Yancy. It's for the best." Naruto saw the downcast look on the dark-haired boy's face. "He's not going to take this well." "Oh, he definitely won't. I can already sense the anger coming from him and I'm quite surprised he hasn't blown up yet," the Biju commented. Naruto shushed his companion and listened in. "No, confound it all. What I mean is, you're not normal, Percy. That's nothing to." "Thanks," Percy blurted. "Thank you for reminding me." Percy then picked up his backpack and walked out. The teacher sighed in exasperation. "Perhaps I was too hard on him." Naruto shook his head. "He just misunderstood, sir, and you only wanted what was best for him." "What teacher didn't want that for his student?" he continued. "Yes. What about you, Naruto? Will you join again next year?" Mr. Brunner asked. Naruto gave a shrug. "I don't know. Frankly, I might stop for a while or follow Percy. Go where he goes and keep him out of trouble." This got the teacher to chuckle a bit. "I guess so. You're a good friend, Naruto. The world could need more people like you." The blonde heard a scoff in his head. He's loyal as a dog and needs to be trained, Kurama muttered, but he ignored it. I'm not that great, Mr. Brunner. Just wanted to stay with my friends. Anyway, I'll see ya around, Mr. Brunner. Both gave a wave to each other as Naruto walked out and went to his where Percy went. Later on, the three friends sat on a bus as it made its way to the bus terminal with many other kids from their school on board. Naruto was going back to Yugo's apartment to talk about the event in the museum, and Percy had found out about their past. Though he feared what she would do to him cause the last time he did something reckless, Yugo had upped his training to torture level, and when he had finished he had been sore for days. Even with his healing factor he had trouble walking without a limp. Surprisingly, Grover was headed to New York like them and was on the same bus as well. Percy thought nothing of it and only a coincidence, but Naruto thought otherwise. Grover kept looking down at the aisle nervously. He fidgeted from time to time and was sweating like he was in a desert. Percy noticed this as well, and both thought that their crippled friend expected something to happen. What's got him so nervous? Percy asked. He got a shrug from the masked blonde. You ask him, I'm going to take a nap. Wake me up when we arrive, Naruto said. He then turned around a bit to get comfortable and closed his eyes. 5 seconds gone and he was out like a light. Mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes to see a green hill, a forest surrounding it with big trees. There was a lake at the side of the hill and a cave. He had changed his mindscape about a year when he and Yugo arrived in New York. He smiled as he saw 10 fox kits ran towards him and promptly tackled him. He fell down on his back laughing as they licked him and skipped around him. Alright, I'm glad to see you two now. Scamp and play somewhere else. They obeyed quickly and ran off with happy yips as he stood up and dusted himself. He sighed in contentment and a hidden smile was on his face. Come on Kurama, you said you had wanted to talk to me before? He called. The ground shook as footsteps echoed in his mindscape. He looked up to see Kurama emerged from the cave. He took off his mask to reveal his face. Through the years of training he had been through, his face was devoid of baby fat and he had a rugged look and his jaw was more defined. All in all, it gave him a haughty personality that girls said who had unfortunately for him saw his face at one time. The boy gave a wolf-like grin to the fox. So what has been bothering you lately? He asked. The Biju laid down on with his head in his arms, which had a serious look. Listen carefully, Naruto. At this the boy stiffened and his eyes narrowed slightly. He gave an imperceptible nod to show he was listening. The fox only ever called on his name when he did something reckless in training or when he discussed something serious. Recently I had felt something that does not belong to this world and only can be found in ours. I do not know what it is, but for something to cross another dimension is like what brought you and Yugo here. Also I can sense its chakra signature familiar, but I do not recall what it is. He said the last part uncertainly. Naruto thought deeply something about this. What had caused for something or someone to go to another dimension? You said it came from the elemental nations and it was familiar to you? He questioned. Kurama nodded. Yes, from what I can sense, and my only hunch is demonic chakra like yours. To put it bluntly, a Jinchuriki was brought here. Are you sure about this, Kurama? He only got a nod in return. Now Naruto stood in shock. A Jinchuriki, like him, was brought to Earth. He didn't know what to think of this. He sat down and tried to think of a way what brought another Jinchuriki to Earth. Do you know who their Biju is? More importantly, did they transport themselves here from using a jutsu, or was it something like mine? The fox's only open eye stared at him. I know who the Biju, it is Nibi or Matabi, my sister, is, but I do not know how they were brought here. To use a jutsu that you thought of would need Biju level chakra, specifically 8 tails, and extreme knowledge of spacetime ninjutsu which only the second Hokage, your father and ourselves knew of, he stated. Kurama referred both himself and Naruto since Naruto is trying to study the Hiraishin, and Kurama also knew of this through his eyes and was the only Biju who understood its concept. The blonde seemed to accept this and stayed silent. One enjoying the piece and the other wondering who the Jinchuriki is, as they watched the fox kids play. Naruto. If the Jinchuriki is somehow hostile, then I will need to help you control my chakra, he started. While it's true we're not arguing and not robbing each other's chakra, a Biju's chakra is still as dangerous just from touch and exposure. Not only that, my chakra is the most dangerous from other Bijus, as mine has its own will tainted with hatred. You would easily lose to the bloodlust just using the first version of the chakra cloak shroud, the fox added. The whiskered teen gaped at what his tenant had said. He could possibly lose to the bloodlust, and whoever is in range can and might get hurt, or even worse, he didn't want that to happen. The boy sighed in resignation. I understand, Kurama. He then felt a tugging on his consciousness. I'll tell Yugo about this when we arrive. She'll want to know what it is, and if I didn't she would run me through another one of her sessions. He whispered the last part and shivered. Yugo, while she can be gentle somewhat, but when it came to training she was a sadist. She took his quick regeneration and his massive chakra reserves into use. 5 seals were placed on his body, 4 on his limbs and 1 in his chest, and 600 shadow clones for training. He had been stuck in a bed for 2 days, and that's with Kurama doing his best to lessen and healing him at the same time. Anyway, I'll see you later, Kurama. Naruto gave a 2-fingered salute and his form shimmered before disappearing. Said chakra entity just looked at where his container was and thought, I wonder what would he think when he knows Matabi's Jinchuriki is. It's been nearly 10 years they haven't each other since the Raikage went to the village to make a treaty. Oh well, from what I can gather from his memories he also has a crush on her. The teasing those 2 kunoichi will unleash on him. The Biju chuckled. On second thought, with his mother they would probably have a hard time teasing with him when she's around. Also, I think she would forbid her son in having a girlfriend, but I wouldn't know. With that thought he laid down, and soon snoring echoed in the blonde's subconscious. Naruto. When Naruto woke up, he found out that only 5 minutes had passed. He looked at his friends and saw Percy looking at Grover like he had been able to walk just fine, while the latter was sweating that could fill up a pail. The Caucasian-skinned boy noticed him awake, seemed to brighten slightly. Oh Naruto, you're awake. Here, let me give you and Percy something, he said. From his shirt pocket, he took out 2 worn-out business cards. Take these. In case you might need me this summer. That rang warning bells in the blonde's head. He didn't like the tone that his friend implied and stressed the need for emphasis. Whatever it is, it's big. Only he shook the thought out and focused on the card. The card was written in some fancy writing. While it was hard for them both to read, they managed to make out what it was. Grover Underwood, Keeper, Half-Blood Hill, Long Island, New York, 800-009-0009. Percy's face flashed a look of hurt for a second, but it was gone just as it appeared. Only Naruto noticed this and Grover was oblivious. So he decided to lessen his friend's pain a bit. Fancy writing, but what's it for? He asked. Grover, the sea-green-eyed boy said. What are you trying to protect us from? Before he could answer there was a huge coughing noise coming from the front. Black smoke began to pour out from the air vents and the bus smelled like rotten eggs. Everyone, out! The driver called out and parked the bus to the side, then guided everyone down. As they went down, one whiskered was glad that he had a face mask and made a filter seal on it. Naruto sighed as he looked at the bus. Troublesome. What are they staring at? He heard Percy asked. Both him and Grover looked at where Percy was pointing, and saw an old fruit stand. There were a lot of different fruits and were all giving colorful scene that gave a tropical look. However, 3 old ladies were on rocking chairs next to it and were sewing a giant sock. The old ladies looked like they were over 100 years old to everyone's eyes, pale faces with wrinkled like fruit leather, gray hair tied back in a bun, and skeletal arms sticking out their bleached cotton dress. And Naruto swore that they were looking straight at Percy. Then he heard Grover whimpering again. He couldn't blame him though. The moment he saw those 3 ladies he had felt something seemed off, and they exuded some energy that felt ancient and old. No. Grover's face turned pale and was shaking slightly. Percy, tell me they're not looking at you? They're looking, are they? He asked in a harsh whisper, although he wasn't angry. Okay, why is he panicking about 3 old ladies staring at Percy? Naruto thought. He was cut off from his wonderings when Grover grabbed them by their arms, making them shout an indignant, "Hey!" from the 2. Then they heard an audible snip. They turned and saw one of the old ladies had a scissors in their hands while another was carrying the yarn they used. Come on. The conditioned boy muttered, then grunted as he kicked the side of the bus. Unexpectedly, the bus sputtered back to life. The passengers cheered as Grover sighed in relief. Only his friends noticed this. Damn right, the driver yelled. He hit the bus with his hat. Everyone on board, good job kid. He gave the boy a slap to the back. Guys, get on, the Caucasian-skinned boy urged his friends, and they did so, still confused at their friend's behavior. They turned back to check the fruit stand and were surprised to see that the three old ladies were gone, leaving not a trace as if they were even there. What the? Percy's eyes widened in shock. I saw them there. How are they gone? His thoughts were similar to his blonde friend. Except he was thinking of the possible ways. Were they shinobis? A genjutsu? I don't know what they were, but they spooked Grover badly. I need to watch out for others. Everyone went back inside and retook their seats. Grover was muttering things to himself and they could hear him what he was saying. This can't be happening. Not like last time. I can't fail again. I had let Talia down. I don't want to let them down too. The boys looked at each other. Either Grover is high or mental, so Naruto asked, let who down? Who's Talia? Grover, did you have a girlfriend before you met us? It appeared their friend didn't hear it or just ignored it and said, it's nothing. He waved his hands in denial. Percy, Naruto, I can't protect you guys when you keep asking questions. They looked at him like he was stupid. Weren't they supposed to protect him when he's the one crippled? Just let me walk you guys to the bus station, promise me guys. They tried to speak but their words died in their throat when he looked at them mournfully. It almost like he would be preparing their caskets for their funerals, so they just stayed quiet so as to not draw more attention to them. The rest of the ride was silent. Naruto and Percy questioned themselves if their friend was going crazy as they arrived at the bus terminal. I'm going to the restroom. You wait for me here, Grover said, as he walked inside the restroom. When he was out of sight, Percy gripped Naruto's arm. Dude, we have to go. I still have to go home and see my mom, not to mention Grover is freaking me out. I know and I think I might come with you. I just need to send Yugo a message that I'll be coming with you. Come on, let's go where no one can see us. He beckoned as they moved to an empty alley. Naruto expanded his sensory field and checked. He found none, so he bit his thumb and ran through 5 hand seals. He then slammed his hand to the ground as sealing formulas appeared. Summoning jutsu, he muttered. A cloud of smoke appeared and dissipated quickly to reveal a wolf. It stood near Naruto's chest considering he stood at 5 feet 6. It had light gray fur and wore a jacket, a kanji on the back saying, Storm. It had white sclera and a black vertical slit and wore a bored expression. Oh hey Naruto. Is it time to play chess or shogi? And who's your friend acting like a fish? The wolf asked. The boy shook his head. Hey Arashi, no it's not time to play and this is Percy Jackson. Percy, this is my personal summon Arashi. And yes, he's a talking wolf that can do the same things as humans if he wanted to, Naruto stated. This got Percy out of his shock. So is he your P? He didn't get to finish when the blonde clamped a hand over his mouth while Arashi started to growl. Don't compare to those mindless mutt you call dogs. You're lucky that you're Naruto's friend and I'm in a good mood today. I suppose this one knows about us now, Naruto? Arashi asked, as he sat on his haunches but still glared at the sea-green-eyed boy. Yes, and he promised to keep quiet about it. Anyway, the reason I need you here is to send Yugo a message for me. Tell her I won't be coming home and I'll be at Percy's home. If she tries to find me, go with her to track my scent. I have a feeling that we might be going somewhere far. The wolf nodded and left in a plume of smoke. Naruto let go of Percy as the boy sighed in relief. So, what is Arashi? A summon. Summoners consider their summons as partners. There are many animal summons but I have the wolves, specifically the elemental wolf clan. They are animals who fight alongside shinobis and could help at any situation. Also don't call him as a pet, it's taboo for them. Call them that and they claw you into next week and bite off your hand. The black-haired boy nodded, good. Naruto then made a cross-hand seal with both his hands using his index and middle fingers, shadow clone jutsu. The usual smoke came with an exact copy of the blonde. Percy shook his head at this. Even if you told me about this and seen it a couple of times, I just can't accept the fact that you can clone yourself. Both Narutos just shrugged, you'll get used to it. The clone walked out of the alley and waited near the restroom. Naruto then put a hand on Percy's shoulders, don't freak out about this. A puddle formed around their feet and they slowly sunk into it. A few seconds passed and they were gone. The puddle from before was gone as well. With the clone, Grover hobbled out of the restroom and only found Naruto standing there with his arms crossed, waiting patiently. Naruto, where did Percy go? He asked in a hurry. All Naruto did was letting his arms fell to his side. He's at his house and don't worry, I'm with him as we speak, he said. But you're here with me. How are you in two places at once? He asked confused. The whiskered teen just sighed. Grover, you were right about us, Percy and me, being special. But I'm more unique, gifted with powers that you'd never imagine. Weird things has been happening around Percy lately and I know that you know about Mrs. Dodds. At this Grover gulped and sweat under the blonde's stare. So remember that Grover. 'Cause everything is gonna get fucked up. And with his piece said, Naruto dispersed into a puff of smoke, leaving a wide-eyed Grover. No way, he whispered in. They appeared outside of Percy's apartment. It was a decent apartment. Naruto only came here when he was invited during Christmas with Percy, Sally, Yugo, and unfortunately Gabe. Percy shivered and looked down confused. How come we're not wet? And why are you panting? He asked. What he said was true. Naruto was panting out of breath. Remember pant what I said, pant about my chakra pant reserves being big and asterisk pant as my energy pant to do my jutsus pant? A nod and Naruto took a deep breath. The body flicker technique is a high-speed movement technique that makes the user moves at high speeds, making it seem like they teleport. When I want I could move from here to say, at the top of apartment. It would only take about a quarter of my reserves, but since we were at the bus station and your apartment was 2.5 km away, it took half of my reserves, he explained. Percy, med, in thought and spoke. So basically the further away you move then more chakra it costs? At this, the blonde sweat dropped while Kurama laughed inside his head. Why didn't I say that much simpler? Because you're forgetful, stupid. The fox snickered and the sweat drop behind Naruto's head seemed to grow bigger as his eyebrow twitched. Sally had been nice when they spent their time with them and occasionally asked when she wrote a letter to Percy Naruto how he was doing or needed anything. Another is she would send free samples of candies from her job at a candy store in Grand Central Station. Both she and Percy also had a gig about blue food. Gabe had said that it didn't exist and Sally made that into reality by cooking blue food. She had even said to the whiskered teen they mostly did it to annoy Gabe. The duo walked inside the complex and made their way up the stairs carrying their bags at their back. Once they got to where Percy's floor is, they went to the front door and Percy pulled out his key and opened it. What they found was revolting sight. Gabe was in the living room with his poker buddies, playing. The TV was set to ESPN but no one was watching. The boys could see Gabe had put on a ton of weight with his thin receding hair and big belly out of his dirty shirt, and the blonde pointed out that Gabe looked like a fat hairless walrus. This got Percy laughing silently as he could. I don't know who's uglier, Shukaku or that pig, Kurama said humorously. Chips and beer cans were all over the floor. The place looked like it hasn't been cleaned in a week. The boys knew that Sally could be a neat freak, and with Gabe as one of occupants, it would never happen. The boys walked in the room as Gabe looked up from his cards and scowled slightly. So you're back and you brought your smart-ass friend with you again. They only frowned, though Naruto's was hidden by his mask, at the comment but did nothing. Is my mom here yet? Percy asked through his gritted teeth. He so badly wanted to punch the stuck-up douche in the face that he won't wake. But a glance from his friend calmed him down. She's working, the fat ass replied. He then looked directly at Percy. You got any cash? This time Percy clenched his fists slightly. No. I don't have any, he lied. Gabe didn't believe him. You took a taxi from the bus station. You probably paid 20. You got $6-7 in change. Somebody expects to live under this roof. They need to carry their own weight. Am I right, Eddie? Percy wanted to yell and Naruto nearly growled as his eyes flickered red a bit, though no one noticed. Come on, Gabe, Eddie said as he gave Percy a pitying glance. The kid just got here. Am I right, Eddie? Gabe repeated. Eddie only scowled, then returned his focus to the game. Percy was about to pull out the money, but his ninja friend put a hand on his shoulder. He looked at him and noticed the glint on Naruto's eye, a mischievous glint. The blonde weaved through hand seals hidden from Gabe's perspective, not Percy's, and whispered, illusion technique, false imagery. A stack of money appeared in Percy's hand and he felt like it was real, but knew that if he crumpled it, the illusion would fade as Naruto had told him before. He sent a small smirk to the blonde and put it down on the table. I hope you lose. He then beckoned Naruto as they went to Percy's room. They heard Gabe shout at them to not act so snotty and called him brain boy. Both gnashed their teeth in anger, obviously directed at their dyslexia and ADHD. When they got to Percy's room they found it littered with magazines and the scent of beer lingered in the air as they put their bags down. It made them want to vomit at how messy Gabe is. "Want some help?" Naruto asked as he looked around. Percy sighed and nodded, taking it as a go. He made a half-ram seal and another 4 identical blondes appeared. They then talked as they cleaned and waited for Sally. "Man, I don't know who's fatter, Gabe or a stuffed pig," a clone said, and the other Narutos nodded in agreement as they arranged some books and clothes. "Tell me about it," Percy replied, fixing his bedsheets. "My mom deserves much better man than him." "We second that notion," the blonde stated as the clones dispelled. From the time he spent with his friend's mom he knew she was a very nice person you could ever meet. Speaking of which, his own mom still had not made contact with him in the past 6 years. He had asked Yugo if she knew where she is, but he only got, "You'll meet her when the time comes." And he was starting to doubt if what his mom said in the letter was true. "Where are you, Mom?" he thought in wonder. "Percy, are you here?" A voice called from the door and Sally Jackson appeared. "You've grown so much since I last saw you." Percy smiled as both he and his mom hugged. Sally got out of the hug and turned to the other occupant in the room. "It's nice to see you again, Naruto." She gave him a hug which he happily accepted. "I hope you liked the candies I sent over?" "Yes, and I've been on a sugar rush lately," he admitted sheepishly. It was true. He would finish 1 pack of candy when he just received it and would get all jumpy. Even if his healing factor kicked in, he was still high on sugar. "Come sit down and tell me everything that went." And they did. They told her everything except the part about Mrs. Dodds, the 3 weird old ladies, and Naruto being a ninja. She might think their ADHD was acting up and might get sent a psyche evaluation. "Did something scare you? You look like you saw something," she commented as she looked at hiccuping Percy. The blonde ninja then realized that his friend must have his mom dearly. It was hard not to, and he would probably be in the same boat. "No," Percy lied. He didn't want to make his mom any more worried. "Alright then," the way she said it meant the conversation wasn't over, and Naruto noticed that. Just then, Sally perked up and turned to Percy. "I have a surprise for you." This got them interested. "We're going to the beach." Percy's eyes widened. "Montauk?" he asked in slight excitement while Naruto looked confused. 3 days, same cabin, Sally confirmed. "When can we leave?" "Right after I change." She then looked towards Naruto. "Naruto, will you be joining us?" Won't I be intruding or something?" he asked nervously. After all, he didn't want to ruin their bonding time. Another is that he felt slightly jealous about Percy, not that he would admit it out loud. "Problem is I can hear your thoughts, kid, and don't be jealous of your wimpy friend." "You'll meet your mother soon," his tenant promised. He inwardly sighed. "I know Kurama, but I can't help think that I won't see her ever." Both Jacksons shook their head with small smiles on their faces. "Not at all." "I bet Percy would also like you to come, just ask Yugo first though." The teen only nodded in thanks with a smile. "Alright, but let me pay for my own," he added. Sally shook her head at how polite the boy is and wondered what the purple-haired woman drilled such mannerism into him. She didn't know how right she was about the drilling part. The happy atmosphere disappeared quickly when Gabe arrived, who also had a scowl. "Sally, bean dip." "Didn't you hear me?" he asked, annoyed. This got the boys to growl at the fat man while Sally sighed softly. She opened her mouth to speak, but the whiskered blonde beat her to it. "Why you don't do it yourself? You have legs, don't you, lazy pig? Shut it, punk. Don't speak to me like that, you brat, because I worked hard and I don't need an orphan who got pitied by some freak of a teen girl scolding me about it." Sally lightly gasped, but the blonde snarled and got held back by Percy, who also wanted to deck the man for the comment about Yugo. He held the older girl in high regards because she was very helpful to them and sometimes gives him tips in regarding about how to fight, which he only now realized why. "You call sitting in this what you call a dump an apartment working? I can see that you've gotten some weight." "Oh wait, all I see a damn pig whose IQ is only 0, fat ass," sneered the blonde as his eyes narrowed and Gabe growled at the insult. Luckily Sally intervened. "I was about to do it, honey," she said while she gave Naruto a pointed look which he understood and quickly calmed himself. "We were just talking about the trip," she explained. Gabe's eye got significantly smaller and simmered down. "You were serious about that?" Sally nodded. "Also don't worry, I'll make it a 7-layer bean dip so that way it can last about a week while I'm not here," she bargained. Gabe's eyes softened and the boys saw he licked his lips and were disgusted just seeing him do that. Alright, but it better come out of your clothes budget. Don't worry, it will, assured Sally. And you won't take my care anywhere but there and back here. We will. And if you hurry about that bean dip, and if the kid apologize for interrupting our game and for disrespecting me, he said with a snide grin. The two boys looked at each other in silent conversation, and Percy glanced at the man before nodding his head to his friend, knowing said friend would punish the guy. Percy, can you take your mom outside and get ready? I'd like to have a word with Gabe privately. The way Naruto spoke made the two adults in the room slightly shiver, and Percy hid his grin the best he could and led his mom outside. As soon as the two left, Gabe's grin was replaced with a glare and growled, "Got something to say, Foxboy?" He got his answer when he felt a fist was buried into his stomach, causing the man to drop to his knees with a gasp. The man felt like a bowling ball was thrown at him, but he didn't dwell on the thought when he felt the temperature around the room drop and he shivered frightened. He turned to the boy and made a mistake at looking into the blonde's eyes. Frosty ice blue orbs with glistening silver around it, and the pupil narrowed into slits, giving the boy a feral look. Naruto, leaking out 1/4 of killing intent, crouched down and grabbed the fat pig's shirt and held him eye level. Listen, Fogliano, because I'll only say this once. Sally deserves someone better, and I don't like the way you treat her. No, I downright hate the way how you treat Sally and Percy, so the next time we meet, I neither want to see you treat Sally other than your housekeeper or servant, nor insult Percy for his attitude, because that's how he is. Fix this dump of an apartment, because it's revolting at how you force her to clean up your trash. If you don't, there will be hell to pay, I can promise you that, and know that I keep my promises. Then he pushed him down and stepped on the man's chest, nearly breaking a rib, and glared at him. And if I ever hear or see you treat Sally or any girl around you, then I'll personally gut you like the pig you are, then feed your remains to rabid dogs that others would mistake you for a hunted animal. Are we clear, Gabriel Ugliano? He asked, demanded. All Gabe could was gasp in pain, then followed up with a nod. Satisfied getting his message across, the boy then knocked him out with a punch to the forehead and walked out of the room, his tenant laughing like a maniac inside his head. Ha 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 ha. His face, he looked like was about to crap himself. The fox then paused and smelled through Naruto's nose and gagged. He really did crap himself, and what a smell. Get out, its mock suffocates T terrible. But I must applaud at how you spoke up this time, because I might have taken over just to punch the man. Naruto nodded his head at his friend's words. He was just glad he got that out of him, because he might just kill Gabe from where he stood. He waited for an hour next to Gabe's car while Sally and Percy packed their things, said boy, catching up with his mom. Gabe still was out cold, and by the time Percy and Sally had come up to the blonde, they were surprised that Gabe didn't show, as they expected him to be there to remind Sally. When Sally asked what happened, he cryptically said, "We had a few words and Gabe had a lot of things to think about." Sally didn't know it, but Percy knew that his friend was grinning behind his mask and slightly smirked as he mouthed a "thank you." The blonde teen just nodded and they got in the car, Naruto, with his headphone on, listening to his iPod, and the mother and son idly talking to each other drove their way to Montauk. Though they heard a shout from the apartment, "Where the hell is the money?" Percy silently snickered, Sally had a worried but confused expression, and Naruto grinned under his mask. Meanwhile, Yugo was impatiently waiting for Naruto to return. She had gotten message 2 days before that he would be coming, and now he was 3 hours late. Yugo blamed herself when she told him about Kakashi's tardiness, and now he's doing the same thing. She'd had to up his training then to remind the boy not to be late. She debated what kind of torture she'd have to do, but was brought out of her thoughts by a puff of smoke. Looking down slightly, she was surprised to see Arashi. "Arashi, what are you doing here? And where is Naruto, and why is he late?" she asked. The wolf bowed his head in greeting. "Hey Yugo." Naruto and his friend, I think his name was Percy, left to the other boy's house. He also said that they might be going somewhere far and told me that I should come with you to track him later, he informed. The retired Anbu raised a brow. "So Percy knows who we are then?" "I expected this with how much trouble Naruto causes," she muttered. She then looked back at Summon. "All right. Just let me G." She didn't get to finish when a light glowed behind the wolf. Instantly Yugo and Arashi were in a battle stance, the girl with her sword drawn and the wolf had lightning arcing around him, to fight the intruder. When the light died down, Yugo gasped in surprise who she saw before she kneeled, Lady Artemis. "I'm sorry, I did not know it was you," forgive me for my hostility." The goddess, in her adult form, only smiled at the girl. "Do not worry, Yugo. I just came to check on you." She then noticed the wolf who was gaping at her. Artemis turned to the former Anbu with a raised eyebrow. "I didn't know you had a wolf as a companion." The purple-haired girl blinked at the comment, then giggled slightly while shaking her head. "Sorry to disappoint Lady Artemis, but he's not mine. He is a companion, yes, however, he is also a summon of the elemental wolf and they accepted your son as their summoner. This guy here is Arashi, the boss summon's son and Naruto's personal summon." The goddess was confused. Where did Naruto get the contract? "I know one needs a contract to summon or must reverse summon themselves to the summoning realm as Minato had brought me to the home of the toads," she asked. "Oh. Lord Fourth had found it during the Third Great Ninja War and he was already a summoner of the toads, so he kept it in a scroll along with his prized techniques as Naruto's inheritance from him. At least that was written in Lord Fourth's journal," explained Yugo. Arashi then was able to speak up from his state of shock. "Why, your Lady Artemis? The goddess of the hunt?" He then rounded to face the purple-haired woman. "Why didn't you say you knew her?" Because I thought it was irrelevant and you didn't ask Arashi?" she said confused, not understanding the wolf was getting at. "It's a big deal because we worship her for befriending the wolves and chose us as her symbol and as her sacred animals. Not only that, our clan elders were one of the few that came from Lady Artemis' pack before they left the group. They made their own pack and learned how to harness chakra." 1. Okay. Yugo digested the information as Artemis looked at the wolf in fondness. What Arashi said was true. Her sacred animal aside from a deer was a wolf, though others say they're called hunting dogs but they're mostly the same. I think, she and her hunters used them to help them track down monsters that Zeus wants to kill or whatever they encounter. She smiled at the now nervous, sheepish wolf. "It is all right, Arashi. I'm pleased with who my son chooses as a partner." This time the wolf's jaw dropped and eyes were wide as dinner plates. "Why your N Naruto's mom? Then, you broke why your VV vow?" At her nod he promptly fainted sideways with swirls in his eyes. Both women laughed lightly at Wolf before turning to one another. "So where is my son now, Yugo?" said girl sighed in frustration. "He's with his friend Percy, who I think is also a demigod and have a hunch who since Naruto told me he smelled like the ocean, going somewhere along the Jacksons. I thought he had imitated Kakashi's tardiness when I told the brat about him. He even has a mask that I try to take it off him or try to sneak a peek whenever he's asleep or eating," she exclaimed. Yugo was too busy to complain to notice Artemis' eye twitching. "Naruto idolizes Kakashi. I just hope he doesn't copy him reading those perverted books that perverted toad geezer writes," she swore in her mind. She looked at Yugo who was now pacing. "Yugo," said girl stopped at being called. "What did Naruto say?" she asked. "He said that if I want to find him I'll have Arashi come with me to track his scent and we'll do it by tonight so no one can see but I'll use genjutsu to be sure." She then made a shadow clone to pack her things and changed her clothes to her old Anbu uniform. She then nudged Arashi awake and quickly told him that they're going to track Naruto down. Artemis also thought of something. "Yugo, please come here." The girl did as she was told and stood in front of the goddess. "I was thinking that I'd let join hunt later on but now would be the best time for it, so, Yugo Azuki, will you join the hunt?" The purple-haired ninja was surprised, but kneeled with her head bowed. "I pledge myself to the goddess Artemis. I turned back the company of men, accept eternal maidenhood and join the hunt." When confirmed, Yugo had a light silver glow around her indicating she's now part of Artemis' hunt. "Rise, Yugo, now find my son and don't tell him that you are a hunter as it would give me away easily and also," the goddess snapped her fingers and Yugo was covered in silver light. It died down to reveal Yugo only much younger, possibly 15 years old. "I turned you to a 15-year-old for you to fit in the hunt. I did the same with Anko when she joined." Yugo smiled gratefully and excused herself as her clone finished its job. She then waved at the goddess and both ninja and wolf disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Artemis shook her head as she thought about her son. "I wonder what Naruto has learned with Yugo, and is he strong enough to challenge a monster yet?" She wondered in both curiosity and worriedly. She shrugged out of her thoughts. She teleported back to her hunter's camp. Back with our favorite blonde Jinchuriki, he was listening to some music from his iPod as both Jacksons continued to talk about what Percy did in the past few months. He had his headphones on so he wouldn't listen to their conversation because he thought it was rude. Another was ever since they came to this new place he loved listening to music, which about 3 months they arrived he had gotten an iPod with his money that he saved up. Before half a year passed he also bought a guitar and played some songs that he liked. Hugo and the others gave him praises about how good he was and Grover suggested that he should play for school's talent show. He did and he promptly became popular with the girl population, even outside of school. He blamed the school journalism club for that and ever since then he was weary whenever he stepped out alone. He also blamed Grover for suggesting for tryouts in the talent show. Also when Naruto and Hugo had arrived to this world his exuberant, loud, and childish side had lessened that the villagers in the Leaf would believe that Jiraiya had stopped writing smut. Or if asked what happened to the old Naruto, he'd say that he grew up and saw what the real world is like. Right now, the car parked next to a wooden cabin that was located right next to the beach. The cabin looked a little old but it looked decent in the blonde's opinion. The beach itself was beautiful that Naruto could compare it to the village at night when he's at the top of the Hokage monument. The white sand and clean blue ocean that glinted as the sun hit it made him admire the place. He now understood why the mother-son Jackson loved the place so much. It looked like they would be the only ones on the beach since there were no other cars parked beside the other cabins. In truth the place looked like it was rarely used, barely even visited. But from the looks on Percy and Sally's face the place was special to them if it is like that. "Alright boys, why don't you unpack our things while I go pay and let the owners know we arrived," she said. Percy smiled and quickly went to the car to start and Naruto put a hand in his back pocket before pulling a wad of money and gave it Sally. "Let me pay for my place." Seeing her about to protest he held up his hand. "I want to pay my own and I guess this like a thank you for the things you did for me," he sheepishly admitted. She looked at him for a second before nodding with a smile and headed off. He followed his raven-haired friend example and both began unloading and taking everything into the cabin. When they walked in, the whiskered teen looked around. It was pretty basic with a couple of cupboards, a small kitchen, a bathroom and a couple of beds. He was thankful there was a bunk bed and a double bed so he didn't have to worry about sharing a bed or sleeping on the floor. A few cobwebs here and there, some slight dust but Naruto thought that it wasn't used much. "It's not much," the sea-green-eyed teen set his bag down while looking around. "But I love coming ever since I was little." "Yeah, I can see why." The beach outside with the ocean view, a campfire just outside with marshmallows, "This place is great if you ask me," Naruto answered. "Yes, I bet Isobu would decimate an army of ninjas just live in this place." Kurama was in awe of the place's scenery and he knew that the three-tailed Biju would definitely love to live in the beach. Percy nodded his head. "Yeah, but my mom has another reason for coming here." He looked out to the window and saw his mom walking into the cabin. "This is where she met my dad." This got a surprised look, judging from the raised eyebrows from his friend. "I actually haven't heard a thing about him. I never met him and I can barely remember something, like a trace of a smile but that's it. From what my mom told me, he was a very rich guy and powerful but very sweet. She said I have his eyes and hair. She met him here talking and getting to know each other but when my mom found out she was pregnant with me, Dad left for business. He went overseas and hasn't come back since." Percy ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "I asked why he hasn't come back and all Mom said he was lost at sea. Not dead. She doesn't like to talk about him, it makes her sad," he stated. Naruto looked at the coming figure of Sally and couldn't help but feel slightly sad for her. She was a good woman who unfortunately had bad things happen in her life. Never once did she get angry and she welcomed him with open arms. Glancing at the woman anyone could tell she's happy just coming here on this beach. Also like years have not affected her and made her look like in her more youthful. Naruto shivered just thinking of the word. "Please don't think of that word. I'm not ready to die yet." Kurama mumbled in the seal. If the teen was in his mindscape, he would have seen the great Kyuubi rocking back and forth with his tails curled around as he sucked on his human, fox hands. Not saying a thing. When Sally met up with the two boys they quickly unpacked and went outside so they could enjoy. Since it was summer the sand was warm when stepped, however when they dipped their feet in the water it was cold as ice. After some swimming in the ocean, they played on the beach with a game of baseball, taking turns who would bat and pitch. That was easily won by Naruto with his speed and shinobi training making a great athlete. Percy was able to hit the ball a few times and he was bit happy with it. Day turned into night with the moon high in the sky, the ocean reflecting its lunar light. Light during the day. But Naruto found it more beautiful under the moon. He felt he was given an energy boost, almost he could take on Yugo and her clones for 5 times and not feel exhausted. Now they were all sitting around the warm campfire as they roasted marshmallow on the end of a stick and made idle talk. "Mom, what was Dad like?" Percy asked. Naruto and Sally were surprised by the question, but all Sally did was put her marshmallow down gently. The boys could see her eyes were a bit glazed, meaning she was reminiscing about Percy's dad. He was kind, Percy. Tall, handsome, and powerful, but also very gentle. You even have his eyes and hair. Percy took it in before asking, "How old was I?" "I mean, when he left." The mother watched the flames dance lightly. "He was with me for only 3 months, Percy. It was right here, on this beach, where we spent our time together." But he knew me as a baby, alright? He asked hesitantly. Sally shook her head. "No, honey. He knew I was expecting a baby but he never saw you. He had to leave before you were born." Her tone sounded sad for Naruto. Percy nodded, hurt that he never got to know who his father is. Who wouldn't when the father of their child had left? "What about you, Naruto?" Sally asked. "You never spoke about your parents. What were they like?" She was quite curious who the blonde's parents are since she never saw anyone, other than Yugo, when they came to visit. She also knew he was an orphan, but Yugo became a guardian when he was 8 years old. Percy also wondered who his friend's parents were but never got asked. He knew it was a touchy subject for Naruto. Said whiskered teen shrugged, "My dad died the day I was born. He held me once and afterwards he left to do something and later died. The closest thing I have to have as a family right now is Yugo as my surrogate sister." "You don't know your parents?" questioned Sally. Even Percy was a bit shocked at his friend's statement. Naruto nodded. "The people before I moved thought it was best that I didn't." Kurama snorted in his mind. "Yes, also regarding about that I'm sealed inside you. They wouldn't tell you except for the old monkey or gray dog. And you should know who I'm referring to." "Why? That's completely unfair. Why shouldn't you know about who your parents were?" Percy asked. He couldn't even comprehend if he didn't know his own mother. Same. So everyone love your moms and be thankful that they're in our lives. Closing parenthesis. I never knew why and just left it at that, but I probably will never see them again. He then smiled sadly. "Until 6 years ago I got a letter, Yugo. When I read it, it said it came from my mom. I asked Yugo if she is still alive and sis said that she was but couldn't see me yet. Something they both said that I'll see mom when the time is right." Percy nodded in understanding while Sally kept quiet as her eyes were wide a bit. Sally was running mile per minute as she thought and stared at the blonde teen. Could he be the same as Percy? It became quiet before Percy asked where would he go because said boy needed a new school to go. Sally just said she'll take care of it and Percy wondered if his mom wanted him around, only for Sally to get teary-eyed and hug her son close to her. Naruto just sat there eating a marshmallow while gazing at the mother and son with envy. "What I'd give to spend time with mom." "Oh, don't worry, brat. I said it before and I'll say it again, you'll meet her when the time is right. Now kindly stop thinking so I can get some sleep." The fox yelled and Naruto winced at the volume of the voice. Naruto. He was jerked out of his thoughts when Sally called out to him. Her hand on his shoulder and was giving him a worried look. "Are you okay?" He nodded and smiled sheepishly. "Yeah. Got lost in my thoughts, hee. Okay then, Percy and I are going in now, don't be too late." She gave him a peck on the forehead and his face had a red hue. He looked down and mumbled, "Okay," as both Jacksons went inside the cabin. When they were out of sight, Naruto sighed as he channeled chakra into right shoulder, and a puff of smoke. He was now holding a guitar. The guitar was white, which was rare for an acoustic guitar. It had green leaf-like designs and blue waves on it. He composed himself and started to strum. Want to listen to the song? Link is at the top or bottom. Now the stars are lined up so perfectly. For everybody, but not for me. Wish it could be easy. But it never goes away. It's never like the movies. It's never like they say. But maybe one day I'll be back on my feet. And all of this pain on me gone. And maybe it won't be so hard to believe. Then I'll found out just where I belong. It feel like it's taking forever. But one day things can get better. And maybe, my time will come. And I'll be the lucky one. Now I can't stop thinking how this life could be. I can keep pretending, but honestly, could we really make a difference? Could we really ever change a thing? It's never like the movies. It's never like you think. But maybe one day I'll be back on my feet. And all of this pain on me gone. And maybe it won't be so hard to believe. When I found out just where I belong. It feel like it's taking forever. But one day things can get better. Then maybe, my time will come, and I'll be the lucky one. So give me a reason to keep holding on. Something that makes me believe. And my life's gonna change. Seems like everyone else gets a shot, gets a break. I can't wait for that to be me. Maybe one day I'll be back on my feet. And all of this pain on me gone. All of this pain on me gone. Maybe it won't be so hard to believe. And I'll found out just where I belong. I'll found out just where I belong. And maybe one day I'll be back on my feet. And all of this pain on me gone. It feel like it's taking forever. But one day, things can get better. And maybe, my time will come. And I'll be the lucky one. And I'll be the lucky one. He sang softly at the end, as ended with a final strum. Naruto sighed as he sealed his guitar back while creating some shadow clones to guard around the cabin, then headed inside the cabin to get some sleep. Unaware someone had watched him and their honey brown eyes were tearing up slightly. Do not worry Naruto, you'll meet us soon enough. Then she suddenly vanished in a pillar of flames. Later that night, Naruto's eyes snapped open as he got up and threw off the covers from him. One of the clones just dispelled and his eyes widened when he got the memories. What the hell? Kurama, wake up, we've got a problem, warned the blonde. Yon's alright, I'm up. Wah, get up and get your sealed now. The teen was way ahead of him and had sealed up everything he had. His actions caused Sally to wake up along with Percy, though Percy had panicked expression on his face making him wonder if his friend had a nightmare. Naruto, is everything alright? Sally asked as she rubbed the sleep out of her eyes. Said blonde didn't answer when he ran straight to the door and opened it. Grover appeared huffing and had his arm ready to knock. He also had a surprised yet tired expression. What were you two thinking? He gasped out. He then gulped down some air. I've been searching all night. Naruto only raised his hand and pointed at Percy. Blame him. He made me, well technically I also was at fault because I did help him leave. He mumbled the last part to himself. He shook his head then remembered his clone's memories. Looking down, he couldn't believe it, yet in front of him was proof. Grover's legs were goat legs. So want to explain this? He gestured at the bottom part of Grover's body. Grover shook his head, no time. We need you and Percy out of here. Sally, wearing a robe to cover up her pajamas, walked in Grover's eyesight and her face morphed into a face of terror as she paled once she saw him. She spun and looked straight at Percy. Percy, she called out over the sound of the rain. What happened in school? She didn't get an answer from him as the goat for legs boy cut in. We have to get out here. It's right behind me, we have to go now. Seeing Percy still in a shocked state she glanced at the only blonde in the cabin and asked, what didn't you boys tell me? Seeing no point in hiding the truth, he told her about the incident about Mrs. Dodds, overhearing Grover and Mr. Brunner talk in said man's office, and 3 weird old ladies when the bus broke down. If it was possible, the mother got paler before she snatched the keys in purse and barked out, boys get in the car, now. Grover ran, more like galloped, trotted. Do goats even gallop? To the car and opened the cars for everyone to get in. Sally, Percy and Naruto ran out of the cabin, all of them still wearing their pajamas. They hopped in the car. Once Sally got behind the wheel she floored and left a small trail of dust. Grover sat beside her and Naruto and Percy sat in the back. They drove through the night along the dark country roads. The wind and rain slammed against the windshield of the car. No one knew how Sally could see where she was going but didn't ask since she kept on driving almost like on autopilot. So, Grover? You and my mom know each other? Percy questioned, finally out of his shock state. Sort of, she doesn't really know me but she knew I was watching over you, both of you. He glanced at the two. Wait, then Yugo knows about you watching me too? The blonde asked surprised. Don't know, but I think she was suspicious of me cause I saw her once staring at me, like I'm some mystery. Naruto groaned, great, our friend turned out to be a stalker and he's talking both of us, he joked. Though he didn't get the desired reaction when Grover gave a mild glare. I was keeping an eye on both of you. Making sure you were okay, but I wasn't pretending to be your friend. I am your friend, he responded seriously. So if you have goat for legs and half-human body, Naruto observed his friend. Then you must be a satyr from what I can tell from my clone's memories. How did you know I'm a wait clone? His voice turned high-pitched at the end. I'll explain later, anyway from the letter my mom told me to study about Greek mythology. That and I can smell your scent, by the way we've got to get you a deodorant. Another glare was thrown at Naruto as Sally and Percy tried stifled their snickers. What is going on though? I can't understand what's happening, Percy said now. Percy, his mother spoke up, there's too many to explain and not a lot of time. We need to get you and Naruto to safety. Safety? From what? Oh nobody, Grover said while looking at the side mirror and rear mirror, checking if something was following them. Just the ruler of the underworld, and some of the most bloodthirsty monsters. Say what? Naruto asked as they both blinked owlishly. Well that's super convenient, Kurama sarcastically commented. Mainly Percy since he's in most danger but we need to get you away as well, Grover stated, who then clamped a hand on his mouth when he realized what he said. The other two boys couldn't wrap their minds around what was happening. Well, Percy couldn't. He was trying convincing himself that it was only a dream. However, he knew he wasn't dreaming, he had no imagination. He couldn't dream something this realistic. Suddenly Sally made a hard left along the road which they found themselves driving past a strawberry farm that had big wooden houses that were darkened. There was also a big picket sign that said pick your own strawberries. Almost there, almost there. The boys heard Grover and Sally mumbled to themselves. Then Percy asked the question that was on his mind, where are we going? The summer camp one told you about. Naruto picked up the tightness in Percy's mom when she spoke. He also can see her eyes were starting to get misty. Grover and him could tell Sally was struggling not to cry, they couldn't blame her. The place you didn't want me to go. Both Naruto and Grover nearly face-palmed at the ignorance of their friend. Sally's eyes then started to leak tears out. Please Percy, she begged. This is hard enough as it is, try to understand. You're in danger. Because some old ladies. They were not some old ladies Percy, Grover cut in, he looked at Percy. Naruto nodded in agreement, those were the fates, weren't they? Yes, and do you know what it means? The fact they in front of you Percy? They only do that when you're about to, when someone's about to die, he said. Terrific, Naruto mumbled as Grover and Percy started to argue over what the middle meant about the latter dying. Sally ignored the two and glanced at the blonde from her rear mirror. Are you okay Naruto? She asked worriedly. It's alright, just hard to take it all that. Look out. He shouted. Sally made a sharp turn when figure unexpectedly appeared beside the car. She nearly hit it but was able to dodge. What was that? The sea-green-eyed teen asked as he tried to hold tight. Nobody answered him because not a second later a blinding flash lit up the area before the car suddenly flipped over and landed upside down and skid to a stop. Oh, my head, Naruto rubbed his head before wincing. He noted that his hand had blood when it was in front of him. Naruto. Hold on, I'm working on healing now. Not a moment later did he feel a slight rush of his tenant's chakra that flowed towards his head. He mentally thanked the fox before sitting up as he thought, did we get hit by lightning? He looked at and saw everyone was thinking the same except for Grover. He had drips of blood that flowed from his mouth. Leaning over the blonde checked his pulse and was relieved he found out he was only knocked out. Boys, we have to get out of here, Sally ordered. The sound of stomping drew their attention down the road. They looked down and could see the large figure lumbering towards them. It looked like he was covering his head with their arms high up in the air like sharp points. Everyone out now. They tried to open it but wouldn't budge. Naruto kicked it but still did not budge. Sighing to himself he thought, they were gonna find out soon anyways. Percy, Sally stay back a little. They did and the whiskered teen held out of his right hand and in a blink swirling ball of blue energy appeared. He reared his hand back then lashed out with a cry, Rasengan. The energy ball grinded into the car's door and got flung out. The two gaped in disbelief before snapping as they got out while Naruto pulled Grover out and carried him over his shoulder. Percy, Naruto. See that giant tree on top of the hill? She pointed to the largest one that towered all the other ones. Head directly towards it and don't stop. Get over the hill and you'll see a farmhouse down the valley. Yell for help, she explained. Mom, you're coming too. Percy grabbed onto her arm and Sally smiled sadly. Naruto then held his free hand into a ram hand seal, Shadow Clone Jutsu. A puff of smoke and Sally felt herself get carried. She looked on shocked to see two Narutos and the one holding her spoke. "We're not leaving you, Mrs. J, so don't even think about it." The clone lightly glared at her as they began to make their way to the hill. "Food," the unconscious satyr moaned, causing Naruto to chuckle nervously. "It's nice to know you're dreaming about food, buddy, but you need to lighten up on the enchiladas because you're heavy for me. And that's saying something because I can carry 2 gallons of water." He kept the last part to himself. R-O-O-A-A-A-R-R-R-R-R. The group slowed a bit and turned to the sound but saw Gabe's car getting thrown out of the way like a tin can. Then they saw a large bulky man running towards them, causing the ground to shake, all the while making loud grunting and sniffing or snorting sounds. As he got closer, the two soaked boys saw that he was easily over 7 feet tall and had large meaty hands. His upper half was furry and fuzzy. His head was very large and also covered in fur and fuzz. Then the most noticeable thing is a shining ring going through his nose and 2 pointed large horns on the sides of its head. "Oh no," Sally paled as she looked before turning and holding tighter to the clone. "Hurry, it's after Percy, but there's a chance it's after you also, Naruto, we have to quick." It was then Percy recognized what was chasing them. "Mom, that thing. It almost looks like—" "Don't say their names, Percy." She cut him off. "Names have power. Pasiphae's son, like in the story of Theseus and the bull on steroids," Naruto mentioned. "Names have power, so he avoided it." Percy's eyes were wide, but how? Those were just myths. He was running along the two Narutos as Blonde kept his pace slow so his friend could catch up. Naruto deadpanned at his friend. "Percy, do you not notice that Grover, our friend, is a satyr whose bottom half is a goat? Then you know me and Yugo about being a shinobi. If me being a ninja is real, then the Greek mythology is real. I'm also beginning to see why Mom and Yugo pushed me to read about it." The pine was a little ways ahead, at least 100 yards uphill. Naruto was doing fine due to his training and stamina, but Percy was starting to lag behind, while the Minotaur was now starting to catch up to the trio when it was smelling for their scents. "His sight and hearing are bad," Sally mentioned. "He's using his nose to smell us. But he'll find out where we are soon." After she said this, the monster roared, facing their direction. "That's just jinxing it. I think your friend has your opposite kind of luck, Kit." The Jinchuriki twitched slightly from his friend's words but didn't comment on it as they moved closer to the tree line. "Wait at the last second and jump out of the way to the side. He can't change directions when he charges," she advised. They nodded, though Percy was hesitant. They then heard it roar as it picked up its pace and see it getting closer to them. They were a bit of distant from the tree but was almost there. Naruto turned to check, but his eyes nearly bugged out of his sockets when he saw the Minotaur behind his friend. Percy dodged to the side now. He shouted, not even hesitating twice. The raven-haired boy did and rolled to his right. Just in time for the bullman to stampede straight just where Percy was and slammed into a tree. Running further away, Naruto set the knocked-out satyr at the bottom of their designated tree before turning around, unsealing a kunai as he did so, and began to run down the hill to Percy and his sei. His head snapped to the side as he received a clone's memories. There he saw Sally running to the other side and back to where the road is. She turned to look back at them and tried to get the bullman's attention. "Go. I can't go with you. I'll keep it distracted." She then started to throw rocks at it. This did not go unnoticed by the Minotaur and charged at her. Sally tried to jump to the side, but the Minotaur learned from its mistake and caught her in her meaty hands. Their eyes widened in horror at that and cried out, "No, Mom, Mrs. Jackson." Sally sadly looked at them, resigning to her fate before the monster squeezed and she disappeared in golden light. Percy watched in horror as his mom disappeared and dropped to his knees. Naruto just looked on in disbelief before it turned into anger and rage. "I could have saved her. Damn it, I could have saved her." His subconsciously started to draw in Kurama's chakra. He then noticed the Minotaur charged towards Grover and he was now in the first stage of Jinchuriki. The air turned colder as the feeling of death started to seep into the air. "Naruto, calm down. You're not ready t." Emotions cut off the connection and the blonde started to make hand seals. He ended with a snake hand seal, water style, water dragon jutsu. All the water around them swirled up to the air and started to form a dragon. Its ruby red eyes glared at Beast while it stepped back in surprise. Ah! The dragon roared before rushing in and slammed into the Minotaur, pushing it back. Percy snapped out of his state and in a fit of rage jumped up to the Minotaur, using its head as a skipping stone, and wrapped his legs around its neck and started to pull at its horns. If Naruto was in control right now, he would have been impressed, but only charged with a kunai ready to slash. A snap was heard when Percy managed to break its horn and found himself at the ground with a horn in hand. The Minotaur turned and backhanded the blonde into a tree, who finally snapped out of his rage. Ack! This is more painful than Yugo's punches, he winced as he clutched his chest. He looked at the monster and saw a big gash at its chest, which was slowly starting to heal, and got back up while it glared at the blonde. Getting up with slight difficulty, the blonde went through more hand seals and ended hair seal, water style. Raging waves. His cheeks puffed, then he opened his mouth slightly and pressurized stream of water gushed out. It sliced through the arms of the Minotaur, who roared in pain and fell down to his knees. Finish it, Percy stabbed its chest. He pointed at Percy's hand and the sea green-eyed boy did. He ran and swung the horn into the Minotaur's chest. It roared in pain before slumping to the ground and exploded into golden dust. Percy gasped a bit before he ran over to his friend and saw he was holding his chest. Naruto, are you okay? Thud! The boy suddenly blacked out from exhaustion. Luckily Naruto was able to catch him. Naruto gasped a bit while he gritted his teeth. Ah, I think one of my ribs punctured a lung. He thought as he lied down on the. Later did he hear footsteps and clopping sound behind him. He strained his head to see and could only make out two slender figures. He figured that they were girls and a larger figure behind them, but couldn't see as his sight started to get blurry and dark. He can see two girls, both blonde. One had princess curled hair that went over to Percy and started to mumble words he couldn't understand, while the other blonde walked towards him. She knelt down and Naruto could see her stormy gray eyes with a tint of blue in them. Then suddenly he felt unknown chakra seeped into his chest. He could hear his breathing starting to lighten and his chest didn't hurt anymore. And he could hear it. He heard her voice, which he was familiar. Chiron, Naruto's hurt. He heard the clopping come towards them. The last thing he thought was, her chakra. It's her, she's here on Earth, then blacked out.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.